Chapter 8:14. Ling Han simply laid out a feast, using all kinds of precious meats and ingredients, including extremely high-level beast meat, 10,000-year treasured pearl, and dragon blood tyrant ginseng, all of which were cooked together in a pot. Although he had no culinary skills, these ingredients were too precious. Just cooking them together was fresh and fragrant, making one's mouth water. Helian Tianyun also drooled disappointingly and said, 10,000-year treasured pearl, even this lord didn't get one back then. And dragon blood tyrant ginseng, this lord has only eaten one. It's all Nyo's, don't take it, Hu Nyo said fiercely. Helian Tianyun finally noticed Hu Nyo, and his eyes lit up as he said, little girl, you're betrothed to someone else? How about this lord? He's just right for you. Pong pong pong. The consequence of this cheap mouth was naturally a beating. Hu Nyo didn't go easy, beating Helian Tianyun until he wanted to cry, making him extremely gloomy. In his last life he was an invincible existence, so why was he beaten 3 times by 3 people now that he was born? Why didn't his dragon's might work again? Stinking brat, don't tell me this little girl is your daughter? He cried miserably. Otherwise, how could she not be affected by his draconic might? This was not only effective against the dragon race, but also against other races. It was just that it was not as effective as the dragon race. Nyo is Ling Han's, Hu Nyo said fiercely, stomping her little feet until Helian Tianyun was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Helian Tianyun was gloomy. Why did all the good stuff get stolen by Ling Han? His peerlessly talented disciple was his son, and this weird little beauty was also his little wife. After it was cooked, everyone fought over the food. Even heaven-tier elites didn't dare to eat too much of such ingredients, at most drinking a few mouthfuls of soup, or their bodies would explode. However, Ling Han, Hu Nyo, Helian Sun Shui, and Helian Tianyun were all big eaters, eating happily. However, Helian Sun Shui was first full. Not because her stomach couldn't eat anymore, but because she couldn't take more energy essence, and had to sit on the side to refine it. Ling Han, Hu Nyo, and Helian Tianyun were still crazily eating, and did not have the slightest intention of stopping. Helian Tianyun became even more depressed and said, I was nurtured by the true dragon's tooth, so my body is strong and powerful. No amount of energy can break my body. But what's going on with the two of you? You can actually eat even more than I can. He felt that he was about to reach his limit. After all, his current cultivation was too low. It's useless. Hu Nyo rolled her eyes at him, meaning that he was too weak. Helian Tianyun could only be speechless. After eating a few more mouthfuls of meat, he could only sit to one side and start refining. He was really a monster, breaking through a few small tiers in an instant and advancing into the gushing spring tier, finally being able to compete with Ling Jian Shui. But after that, it would not be so simple for him to increase his cultivation level. After all, the higher his cultivation level, the more terrifying the amount of energy needed, especially for advancing from the heaven tier to the shattering void tier. The amount of energy needed was astonishing. But to him it would only take 1 or 2 years, at most 2 or 3 years. Like Ling Han and Hu Nyo, there was almost no obvious improvement. After all, their battle prowess had reached the heaven tier, so it was naturally difficult to improve further. Let's go, it's time to leave this place. Ling Han snapped his fingers. After cleaning up the pots and bowls, they walked back. Su Xiu Ran and the others should still be guarding the entrance, Ling Han said. This time there's no terrain advantage, so we'll have to fight it out. Helian Tianyun jumped out. He did not believe that the world was full of monsters like Ling Han and Hu Nyo who were not affected by his dragon's might. Ling Han laughed mischievously and said, Don't die right after you're born, at least leave a few mystical powers for my son. You jinx! Helian Tianyun shouted in anger. Unfortunately, he no longer had the valor he had in the past, or else he would definitely teach this human a good lesson. He actually dared to look down on him, the great alternative dragon. They came to the entrance and sure enough, Su Xiu Ran and the others had already discovered the commotion. They stood up one after another and blocked the entrance. Helian Tianyun swaggered a few steps forward and snorted. Juniors, why don't you kneel when you see me? Su Xiu Ran and the others already knew that Ling Han had a spatial divine tool, so they were naturally not surprised by the addition of a little brat, and completely ignored him. Dong Ling said, Ling Han, hand over the true dragon's tooth and the spatial divine tool. You should know that you definitely can't leave here alive. Helian Tianyun was furious. Too hateful, ignoring him again. Moreover, he wanted the true dragon's tooth. Wasn't he the true dragon's tooth? He snorted, and Wang Dragon's might was unleashed, charging towards the four people mightily. Yeah. Su Xiu ran and the others all grunted. Under the pressure of the dragon's might, their faces all turned pale. Even if they were all kings of martial arts, under such dragon's might, they still had a feeling of difficulty breathing. Su Xiu ran immediately revived the absolute saber, and an absolutely powerful saber intent circulated, instantly blocking the dragon's might. The Son of Lightning wasn't slow either, and similarly drew out the mountain and river axe. This precious tool shone and also blocked the dragon's might. Helian Tianyun couldn't help but feel bitter in his mouth. His dragon's might was blocked again, so how could he endure this? Thankfully, these two juniors didn't block it with their own abilities, but with two spirit tools. Otherwise he really would have cried. He stared at the two spirit tools for a while, and muttered, "Those are replicas of the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe." Once he recognized them, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. The first master of the absolute saber was even an elite of the immortal realm, and that mountain and river axe was formed from the realm power and source power of this realm. Even if it was just a replica, it still had some special might, and it was reasonable that it could rival his dragon's might. Su Xiu ran and the Son of Lightning could resist the dragon's might, but the small sword emperor and Dong Ling couldn't. Even if they also had level 10 spirit tools bestowed by their elders, they had no effect on the dragon's might. After all, this was an alternative dragon that had once been invincible in the world. Su Xiu ran and the Son of Lightning hurriedly guarded Dong Ling, and the small sword emperor, lest Ling Han took the opportunity to kill them. In this way, their battle prowess instantly dropped to 2. Though they still had the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, their threat was greatly reduced after all. Ling Han laughed and used the Revere Life Sword to open the way, charging out. Though Su Xiu ran and the Son of Lightning attacked with all their might, suppressing the Revere Life Sword wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Ling Han didn't linger in battle, and left with his people, leaving Su Xiu ran and the others in a dilemma whether to chase or not. If they chased, what if Ling Han and the others turned back? What would Dong Ling and the small sword emperor do then? If they didn't chase, the other party must have obtained the true dragon's tooth. Were they supposed to just watch them leave? But in the end they still didn't give chase. After a good while, the small sword emperor and Dong Shui finally recovered from the trembling of the dragon's might, and they both revealed expressions of fear. How could this aura be so terrifying? The situation has already gone beyond the scope of our control. Return to the middle state immediately, and ask the sect's ultimate elites to act, kill Ling Han, and take back the true dragon's tooth. That little boy is also very terrifying, actually able to emit an incomparably terrifying dragon's might. We can't let him go either. As long as I find the way back, it will be the time for the elites of our 5 sects to take your life. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress said harshly. She knew that these 30 or so immortal level elites were completely insufficient in front of someone at the high extreme. This wasn't a battle, but rather a one-sided massacre. Ling Han shook his head and said, "For her sake, I originally wanted to spare your life, but you are seeking death yourself." He used his body as a bow, and drew the annihilating dragon star arrow. Xiao, the arrow light turned into a streak of light, and shot out swiftly. What cultivation level was he at now? Even if he didn't use a real bow and arrow, and didn't use the ultimate arrow, the might of the annihilating dragon star arrow was still enough to surpass 5 stars. He was merely in the early stage of the low extreme, so could he block the battle prowess of the middle stage of the consummate level? Who? The arrow light streaked past, and Azure Phoenix Divine Empress and Dong Ling both released agonized screams. They had been killed with one arrow, and their hearts had both been pierced through. The eyes of master and disciple instantly lost their luster, and their exquisite and beautiful faces were dim and lifeless. They both fell from the skies. Since they were enemies, then what difference did it make whether they were men or women? With him and the Azura Demon Emperor overseeing things, even if the 5 sects had an advantage in terms of the number of elites, so what? They would still only be slaughtered. Moreover, though the Rain Emperor and the others had just broken through, they had comprehended Tao under the reincarnation tree. Which one of them hadn't comprehended Tao for a few decades? Furthermore, they had also received the support of Ling Han's resources, and their cultivation in the Shattering Void tier had almost reached a perfect level. Even Morongqing had 4 stars of battle prowess, and the Rain Emperor had even reached 5 stars. In truth, there was no need for Ling Han to make a move. Merely his 3 brothers would be enough to wipe them out. In a mere hour, the elites of the 5 sects had all been slaughtered. Not only immortal level elites, but Shattering Void tier elites had also naturally come, and all of them had been killed. Your Majesty, spare us. The remaining rebel forces all knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Their cultivation level was too low, and there wasn't even a Shattering Void tier elite among them. In this kind of battle, they wouldn't be of any use at all. Just a pressure from the Emperor was enough to make them kneel on the ground. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually appear at this moment, and he was as powerful as a heaven god? This caused them to recall the scene when Ling Han had split open the skies. He alone had supported the heavens, and split open the universe, possessing an incomparably divine might. They actually wanted to rebel against such a person? Fuck, had water gotten into their heads back then? Seize them and execute them at the Meridian Gate, Ling Han said coldly. There were some limits that could not be crossed. Otherwise, how could he rule the country, and how could he convince the masses? With a single thought, the cultivation of these traitors was all crippled. Like wolves and tigers, the guards charged forward and seized these traitors. All of them deliberately punched and kicked them. These guards naturally hated these traitors to the core. How many things had Ling Han done for the lower realm? And they actually dared to rebel while he was away as a hostage. Fuck, they really wanted to kill this bunch of beasts that gave birth to sons without assholes right now. Ling Han passed on a message through the totem, announcing his return, and also recounting the whole story of this rebellion. His voice boomed and spread to every corner of the great Ling Empire. Long live our emperor! His Majesty has returned. The common people were all cheering endlessly. The common people were very honest. They did not care who became the emperor. As long as their own lives were good, that would be a good emperor. Ling Han had freed them from the fate of becoming a realm pill. This was a life-saving grace. He had brought them to the immortal realm, where spiritual qi was abundant. Though not everyone knew how to cultivate in this kind of environment, not only would they not fall ill, their lifespan would also be extended. At least living to 100 years old would not be a problem. This was also a great favor. Who would not love and respect such a good emperor? There were actually heartless beasts that wanted to seize power. Hey! Many people brought eggs, apples, and oranges. They were going to behead those traitors at the Meridian Gate. They were going to embarrass them, and make them infamy for 10,000 years. Ling Han summoned Yu Kai Yu, Qian Wu Yong, Hu Feng Yu, and other old friends of his from the past into the imperial palace. Previously, he did not want to reveal the secret of his return, so he did not meet with these old friends. Now that he had dealt with the trash of the 5 sects, he naturally had to meet with these people. He began to deliver alchemical pills to the major sects again. Oh. Chapter 8:16. Since this lord has returned, the king of the 4 seas obviously belongs to this lord. Helian Tianyun boasted shamelessly. Summon the whole world for this lord. Let whoever from the Ao family immediately come and pay respects to this lord, and prepare to abdicate. If these words were heard by the martial artists of the Middle State, they'd definitely be dismissive, laughing at him as a madman. A mere gushing spring tear actually dared to make the ruler of the 4 seas abdicate. Wasn't this a huge joke? However, Helian Rong and the others didn't find it funny at all, and instead thought it was a matter of course. Lord Ancestral Dragon, what kind of supreme existence was that? Accepting the position of Sea Emperor was a matter of course, or else who dared to put the position above Ancestral Dragon? Wasn't this rebellion? Only Ling Han knew that this wasn't some ancestral dragon, but the strongest dragon from who knew how many millennia ago, reaching the height of alternative dragons. However, this alternative dragon was reborn with the tooth of a true dragon, and in terms of bloodline, it wasn't an exaggeration to call him a true dragon. Lord Ancestral Dragon. This human killed a dragon's descendant. I beg for Lord Ancestral Dragon's permission to let me kill him. Mo Yuan still refused to let Ling Han go. Helian Tianyun glared and said, "This human is the father of this lord's disciple, and is also this lord's brother. Do you want to kill this lord's brother?" With such a glare, the dragon's might pervaded, extremely terrifying. Mo Yuan was instantly scared to the point of prostrating, and said, "I dare not, I dare not." A dignified shattering void tier elite actually trembled like a sheep. This was impossible to happen in the human world. As the saying went, a warrior could be killed but not humiliated. To be able to reach the height of the shattering void tier, which one wasn't a genius, a king among kings? How could they bend? However, the sea race's success was due to bloodline, and their failure was also due to bloodline. With the addition of bloodline, the number of elites far exceeded the human race. But when it came to the battle of peak battle prowess, they couldn't compare. Not to mention others, just take the 8 kings of the Purple Moon Empire. Which one of them could be fought by Helian Rong and Wenren-Jie? The sea race had a great advantage in the number of elites, but when it came to peak battle prowess, the human race was stronger. The 1,000 Corpse sect knew and even tossed out a 15-eyed Corpse king. What did the sea race have? In the sea race, the level of one's bloodline overpowered everything else. Even if Helian Tianyun's current strength was pitifully low, just his dragon's might alone was enough to make them tremble. Wasn't this enough to explain everything? Helian Rong's face twitched. Lord Ancestral Dragon had accepted his grandson as a disciple, so he naturally didn't dare to put his seniority above Ancestral Dragon. He didn't even dare to be of the same generation. Then, how should he address Ancestral Dragon and Ling Han? It's a mess. It's all a mess. Why haven't you scrammed yet? Helian Tianyun shouted. His small face was full of pride. Previously he had been stifled for so long, and now he could finally hold his head high for once. Mo Yuan hurriedly scrambled away, not daring to even let out a fart. Wenren-Jie and Xian Yutong also didn't dare to talk nonsense, and left with their clansmen one after another. This Ling Han actually became Lord Ancestral Dragon's brother. Who would still dare to have ideas against him? Xian Yutong was even more resentful. If he hadn't forcefully paired Ling Han and Xin Yukai together earlier, then he would be able to form a relationship with Lord Ancestral Dragon now. He regretted it to death. Xin Yukai also looked at Ling Han with a peculiar gaze. During the trip to the ghostly dragon cave, her impression of Ling Han had already changed greatly, and she even had a favorable impression of him after being saved by him. However, she never imagined that when Ling Han reappeared, he actually became Lord Ancestral Dragon's brother. Who knew how many beauties of the sea race wanted to marry Ling Han, and even she, this pearl, could only be said to be climbing up the social ladder, completely losing the qualifications to be reserved. She sighed inwardly. This man never belonged to her, so she'd forget about him in the future. She followed Xian Yutong and left, yet tears uncontrollably flowed out of her eyes. Why haven't you scrammed yet? Helian Tianyun looked at Helian Rong, somewhat puzzled that he actually didn't obey his orders. Helian Rong obviously didn't dare to disobey, but was pulled back by Ling Han, and didn't manage to leave. If it were before, he'd casually shake and push Ling Han to the side. If a shattering void tier elite wanted to leave, how could a puny deity transformation tier elite be qualified to stop him? But now, how could he dare to make a move against Ling Han? This was Lord Ancestral Dragon's brother, and if he made a move, it would be insubordination. Any member of the sea race could go on a punitive expedition against him. This was treason. What the sea race paid the most attention to was bloodline, just like how the Ao family was the master of the 4 seas. Whoever disrespected them would be the enemy of the entire sea race. Seeing Lord Ancestral Dragon fly into a rage, Helian Rong hurriedly went towards Ling Han, meaning that since he pulled him back, now it was obviously up to him to explain. Ling Han coughed and said, "Let me introduce you. This is my father-in-law, your disciple's grandfather. Additionally, his surname is also Helian, and he's called Helian Rong." Helian Tianyun instantly spat out a mouthful of water, directly hitting Helian Rong's face. Poor Helian Rong not only didn't dare to get angry, he didn't even dare to wipe it, and had to put on a smiling face. What, his surname is also Helian? Helian Tianyun had a bad feeling, and immediately pointed at Helian Sun Shui, and said, "Then what about her? Is she also from the Hellion family? Wrong, she's my wife. Marrying me means she's a member of the old Ling family, Ling Han said with a mischievous smile. Hellion Tianyun instantly flew into a rage, and said, "Damn brat, you actually dare to set this lord up." Ling Jianshui was clearly his bloodline descendant, and there was no need to accept a disciple at all. That was his descendant. Now that this disciple was accepted, he and Ling Han would be equal in seniority. Wasn't it a huge loss? Originally, Ling Han would have to call him ancestor. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Who asked him to be hot-headed when he saw that Ling Jianshui's bloodline was incomparably pure? Hu Niu was in a bad mood and directly smacked his head and said, "What, you're still in the same seniority as Niu? Do you know how amazing Lord Niu is?" Hellion Tianyun staggered from the hit, but facing Hu Niu, he didn't dare to have the slightest bit of temper, and only weakly said, "But this lord is their ancestor after all." "Ancestor, what ancestor? Believe it or not, Niu will beat you into ashes," Hu Niu said fiercely. Hellion Tianyun instantly became a little wife, and didn't dare to make another sound. This little girl didn't know how to control her strength, and was completely reckless. He would rather offend Ling Han than this little demon girl. Hellion Rong, on the other hand, was covered in cold sweat. A mere human actually dared to smack Lord Ancestral Dragon. This was treason. But even Lord Ancestral Dragon endured it, so how could he dare to step out? Did he think he was more awesome than Lord Ancestral Dragon? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Father-in-law, this was the strongest warrior of the sea race back then, the alternative dragon that transformed into the ghostly dragon cave. At the same time, he was also the ancestor of the Hellion family, and his name was Hellion Tianyun." Shit! Hellion Rong's expression immediately became extremely marvelous. He had never expected that the Lord Ancestral Dragon he thought of was actually the ancestor of the Hellion family. Moreover, he was once the #1 expert of the sea race, an existence that had almost become a true dragon. This was also a gap in history. The existence of the ghostly dragon cave allowed the sea race to know that there was once such a powerful warrior, but the information about him was completely blank. This time the seniority would be even more messed up. In a daze, Hellion Rong thought so. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 8:17. While surprised, everyone still evacuated the island and headed towards Dome Cloud Island. It took 5 days on the road, and when they arrived, Hellion Tianyun broke through another major tier and became a spiritual ocean tier existence. Such cultivation naturally wouldn't be taken seriously by elites, but completing a breakthrough in just 5 days was an extremely astonishing thing. He estimated that in another 10 days, he would be able to cross into the spiritual pedestal tier, 1 month to flower blossom tier, 2 months to spiritual infant tier, 4 months to deity tier, and a year later to heaven tier, beginning to attack the shattering void tier. He was originally the world's #1 expert of that generation, and now his foundation could only be stronger. It wouldn't be surprising to return to the peak in the shortest time. Of course, all kinds of cultivation resources must keep up, or else it wouldn't be a matter of 1 year, but 10 or even 100 years. Under Hellion Tianyun's strong suggestion and request, Ling Han finally agreed to let his son stay in the sea race. He was just short of rolling on the ground begging. Ling Jianshui's true dragon bloodline was extremely pure, and with Hellion Tianyun's guidance from childhood, he could obtain the best growth. Although Hellion Sun Shui was reluctant, for the sake of her son's future, she could only let go. After all, the Great Ling Empire couldn't do without her governance, and if it was handed over to Ling Han, she wouldn't be at ease. Everything was for her son, she thought. After splitting open the sky, Ling Jianshui would be a second-generation master of the divine realm. Ling Han kept the largest true dragon bloodstone. According to Hellion Tianyun, Ling Jianshui's bloodline was pure enough, and the dragon's bloodgrass wouldn't be very helpful to him. Only the true dragon bloodstone could still play some role. Therefore, Ling Han left many other treasures in the Black Tower. Hellion Tianyun would concoct body-tempering potions for Ling Jianshui, ensuring that he would obtain the best conditions for growth. Ling Han was naturally at ease. Hellion Tianyun was the ancestor of the Hellion family, so how could he not think of his son? He and Hellion Sun Shui decided to come back a year later. By then, the medicinal ingredients left would be almost exhausted, and they would have to be replenished. Helion Rong, on the other hand, threw the two out of Dome Cloud Island. He couldn't wait to brainwash Ling Jianxue. I'm your grandfather, the person who loves you the most in the world, closer than your parents. After the brainwashing was successful, wouldn't Ling Jianxue be a member of the Helion family in the future? How could Ling Han not know what his father-in-law was thinking? He laughed in his heart. When his son was about 5 years old, he would definitely bring him back to his side. No matter how close a grandfather is, can he be compared to a father and mother? Both of them had their own thoughts. After laughing for a while, they turned around and left. Your and royal father's smiles are so fake, Helion Xuanxue pointed out. You want to steal my son? So what if you're my father-in-law? Ling Han laughed. Hurry up and go back. I wonder if the court is in chaos after being away for so long. Helion Xuanxue rolled her eyes at him and said, It's fine even if you don't go back for 100 years. If I don't go back, it will be a mess. Ling Han sweated and said, If you say that, I will feel very guilty. This trip could be said to be an unexpected harvest. With Helion Tianyun keeping watch, the unification of the North Sea was a sure thing, but it was believed that the Ao family wouldn't easily relinquish power, and would definitely question Helion Tianyun's identity as the ancestor dragon, mobilizing all the forces of the four seas to go on a punitive expedition. Unfortunately, the sea race was a place that paid the most attention to bloodline. He began to refine the true dragon bloodstone and blood locust tree heart. Although the largest piece was left in the North Sea, they later obtained a few more pieces in the ghostly dragon cave, and the harvest was quite bountiful. Containing the essence of dragon's blood, it was beneficial to everyone, but limited in quantity, and could only be refined by Ling Han and Helion Xuanxue. Only with them would such a treasure be able to display the most perfect effect. The dragon blood essence left behind by a 20 stars shattering void tier elite was awesome as expected. Ling Han's 9 dragons tyrant body art improved extremely quickly, and after only a dozen or so days, Ling Han discovered that his brute force touched the limit of the deity transformation tier. Next, he could first rush his body art to the heaven tier, which would also bring about a qualitative change in the indestructible heaven scroll, upgrading his physique to the level of 10th tier rare metal. In this way, there would be only a handful of people in the world that could hurt him. He made up his mind to rush his body art to the heaven tier as soon as possible. On this trip to the sea race, there was another major gain, and that was that he obtained the 10th level of the art. After his origin power level advanced to the peak of the heaven tier, he could change to this art and use it to rush to the shattering void tier. This art was obviously abducted from his father-in-law, with the face of Helion Xuanxue and Ling Jianxue. Plus there was also Helion Tianyun, the old ancestor. How could Helion Rong refuse? Ling Han refined a lot of medicinal pills according to his own situation, allowing him to better adjust himself and improve the level of his body art. Another month later, he finally advanced his body art to the level of the heaven tier. And at this time, the elites of the Middle States' 5 great sects charged over again. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 8:18. The Middle States' 5 sects attacking was within Ling Han's expectations, so he was naturally not surprised. On the contrary, the 5 sects taking so long to send people over was a bit unexpected for Ling Han. Presumably, the pressure from the Purple Moon Empire was too great, causing the 5 sects to be unable to spare any manpower. He was a little expectant. Who would come? Ling Han walked out of the Imperial Palace and saw a battleship parked above the Imperial Palace in the sky. A flag was inserted, drawing something that couldn't be distinguished whether it was an earthworm or a long snake. Earth Dragon Sect. True, he killed Jia Ming, so it was reasonable for the Earth Dragon Sect to dispatch elites to kill him. Hung, such a minor character dares to establish a nation, truly ignorant. A cold voice came from the sky. This voice was a bit familiar. Beast Snake King Ling Han immediately recalled that when the 15-eyed Corpse King appeared, a total of 3 Shattering Void tier elites walked out from the 5 great sects, and among them, the Earth Dragon Sect's elite was this Beast Snake King. He bite me, Ling Han said with a smile. Lord Beast Snake King, can you allow me to fight this person first? Su Xiu Rant's voice came from the battleship. Alright, this person should be considered your inner demon. If you kill this person, you can advance into the Shattering Void tier in the shortest time. And with your talent plus the sexful nurturing, it won't be difficult to charge into the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier in a dozen or so years, with battle prowess within reach, the Beast Snake King said. Although Su Xiaoran wasn't the strongest genius in the history of the Absolute Saber sect, he was the only one who received the approval of the Absolute Saber sect. Precisely because of this, even the Beast Snake King had high expectations of him, or rather thought highly of him. After all, that ancestor of the Absolute Saber sect was still alive. Thank you, Lord. Su Xiaoran leaped out from the battleship, stood in the air, and said, Ling Han, let's fight to our heart's content without external help. Ling Han shook his head and said, You're a bit shameless. You're obviously already at the peak stage of the heaven tier, yet say you want to have a good fight with me. I really don't know what's wrong with your brain. He smiled and said, however, if I don't fight with you, you will think that I am afraid of you. He soared into the air, standing side by side with Su Xiaoran, and said, Come, I am the emperor of the Great Ling Empire. A mere clown, how can I suppress you? Su Xiaoran snorted coldly and said, What Great Ling Empire's emperor? You're nothing but a fake king. Today, I will behead you with my saber. And what Great Ling Empire will there be? Ling Han scratched his ear and said, How many times have you said that you want to kill me? I'm sick of hearing it. Can't you change it to something new? Then die. Su Xiaoran flew up and slashed at Ling Han with his invincible blade. There was nothing fancy about this slash, it was just fast. The saber seemed to have just been brandished, but it had already slashed in front of Ling Han. The saber light was dazzling, as if heaven and earth had just been created. This Su Xiaoran really couldn't be small. It had only been a few days, yet his strength had made astonishing progress again. It was not his cultivation but his combat prowess. His comprehension of the saber Dao had improved significantly. The Revere Life Sword in Ling Han's hand trembled as if it was about to fly out of his hand. Dao Xian Ling Han smiled faintly. His sword heart moved, and the Revere Life Sword immediately stabilized. He raised his sword to parry Clang, just in time to parry Su Xiaoran's slashing blade. If it had been any other deity transformation tier, or even celestial tier, their heads might have been chopped off by this blade in a blur. It was so fast that they couldn't block it at all. He could even see the shadow of the saber with his eyes. However, his movements were too slow and he was unable to parry the attack. He could only use his origin energy to defend himself. However, Ling Han was a body cultivator. Additionally, his body techniques had also reached the sky human stage. Thus, blocking the attack was a piece of cake for him. The saber and the sword clashed, bursting forth with boundless radiance that was as dazzling as the sun. Ling Han pushed forcefully and Pang Su Xiaoran was sent flying by him. He cracked a smile and said, This slash is fast, but it doesn't seem to have enough power. Nonsense, power and speed couldn't be had at the same time. This slash of his was extremely fast, so it was naturally lacking in power. This was also because Su Xiaoran knew that Ling Han's body techniques were strange, which was why he specifically practiced swift blades. However, he didn't expect that Ling Han wouldn't play by the rules and actually didn't dodge or evade, playing hard with him. He flipped over and stabilized his figure. He raised the absolute saber horizontally, his gaze awe-inspiring. Endless saber will circulated within his body, turning into substance and surging out, forming tens of thousands of sabers around him. There were all kinds of them, all condensed from saber will. This couldn't harm the physical body, but it could slash the soul, which was very frightening. Enlightened sword heart could slash the soul, and enlightened saber heart naturally could as well. Then take another slash from me, Su Xiaoran said coldly. His expression was solemn, and the absolute saber danced slightly, creating ripples. Splitting wind blade. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless. The power of this slash was indeed frightening. He also raised the Revere Life Sword horizontally in front of his chest. The mysterious 3000 sword will circulated, and similarly, there was a great power spreading out. On the warship, the Beast Snake King couldn't help but let out a soft cry of surprise. How powerful of a being he was. He naturally immediately realized that Ling Han's sword will gave him a sense of déjà vu. This is the 3 styles of black origin. This was one of the ultimate techniques of the Heaven Sword sect, and he was no stranger to it. Su Xiaoran gave a light shout, and brandished the absolute saber to launch an attack. Suddenly, heaven and earth lost all color, leaving only absolute darkness. Only the absolute saber emitted endless light, sweeping towards Ling Han. Even if Ling Han opened his eyes, he wouldn't be able to see where Su Xiuran was. He could only see that resplendent blade slashing towards him. Not a person, only a blade. Ling Han was fearless. He simply closed his eyes and only used his spirit. Sword heart. The corner of his mouth curled into a smile, and he brandished his sword, unleashing 3,100 resplendent sword lights. Each sword light was swift and fierce, slashing towards Su Xiuran. In theory, 10,000 techniques returned to 1 was the strongest single target killing move, while the mysterious 3,000 was used to deal with group attacks. Because the power was dispersed, its destructive power was naturally inferior to 10,000 techniques returned to 1. But Ling Han was too strong now, and added with the sharpness of the Revere Life Sword, even the power of 1 slash was enough to pose a huge threat to Su Xiuran. Then the effects of using the mysterious 3,000 would naturally be better, as it could expand the range of attack. Both sides clashed with ultimate techniques right from the start. Boom! The sword light and the saber light collided, forming a huge explosion in the sky. For a moment, everyone was blinded and deafened. All they could see was a vast expanse of whiteness, and only a buzzing sound was left in their ears. When the light and shadow dissipated, Su Xiuran had already retreated over 1,000 feet. There were a total of 5 places on his body that were bleeding, and he couldn't stop no matter what. How could a wound cut by the Revere Life Sword be stopped just like that? On Ling Han's body, there were also 3 places where his clothes were sliced open, but his physique was as warm as jade, and no matter how one looked at it, it couldn't be seen where he was injured. After his physical arts advanced into the heaven tier, his physique also rose another level, reaching the height of 10th tier rare metal. In the hands of a shattering void tier elite, the absolute saber should be able to leave a mark on 10th tier rare metal, but if it were Su Xiuran, it was obviously impossible. The difference of a hair's breadth was like the difference between heaven and earth. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 8:19. It was clear that Ling Han was not very good at coming up with names. One could tell just from the names he had come up with before. It was practically too horrible to look at. It's godly metal now, but it could possibly become divine metal in future, so let's call it Divine God Sword. Ling Han thought for a while and suddenly lost interest. He very casually gave this divine sword a name. However, isn't the Divine Demon Sword more domineering? Let's just call it Divine Demon Sword. Ling Han was very unprincipled, and he was really very bad at coming up with names. He chuckled as he slashed to his heart's content, causing the Divine Demon Sword to continuously grow. With each slash, the Divine Demon Sword would advance slightly, but this advancement was very slow. If it really wanted to complete the qualitative change from level 1 to level 2, it would need the support of a vast amount of godly metal. Thankfully, to me now, level 1 godly metal really isn't that valuable. Let's just burn money for me. Ling Han slashed for a total of 3 days and 3 nights in the Black Tower, and the amount of level 1 godly metal that he had slashed into pieces was innumerable. During this time, he had also left once to replenish a large amount of godly metal. Finally, after 3 days, the Divine Demon Sword welcomed a qualitative change. It had advanced to the level of level 2 godly metal. Ling Han discovered that in this process of qualitative change, the Divine Demon Sword's capacity to accommodate his martial intent had also reached a peak. In a short instant, 7 divine patterns had actually been engraved on the body of the sword. This caused Ling Han to be incredibly delighted. One had to realize that wanting to use one's own martial intent to leave an imprint on a weapon in the form of a divine pattern was an extremely long process. After all, it was activated by one's will, and not origin power. Thus, nurturing a god tool would take at least a few decades or even a century. However, when the Divine Demon Sword underwent a qualitative change, it was as if it had become a blank piece of paper that Ling Han could draw on as he pleased. In an instant, 7 divine patterns had been engraved on the sword. How could Ling Han not be elated by this? Right now, the toughness of the sword has reached the level of level 2 godly metal, and the might of the Divine Demon Sword has reached the level of a level 1 god tool. This meant that if he didn't activate the Divine Sword, and only used his own power to slash, the divine demon sword would be an ordinary level 2 god tool, and not a god tool. However, if he activated the might of the divine demon sword, he would be able to unleash the battle prowess of a level 1 god tool. I still have to continue to improve it until it's equivalent to my power. Otherwise, if it clashed with a level 3 or level 4 god tool, it was extremely likely that it would be sliced in half, and he would have to find Jinzhihui to repair it. Otherwise, if he randomly reconnected it, it was possible that he would destroy the special characteristics of the devouring metal. Otherwise, why would Jinzhihui be in such a difficult position, and spend over 10,000 years to forge this divine demon sword? But I'm out of money, I'm so poor, sigh. Previously, when he had bought level 1 godly metal, he had practically used up all his savings. Even if he still had a few true origin stones left now, how many pieces of level 2 godly metal could he buy? No wonder Small Tower had said that there was only a theoretical possibility that the devouring metal could transform into divine metal. In the end, he would probably have to find all the level 20 godly metal in the whole immortal realm, and only then would he be able to make the devouring metal complete the final leap. Oh, that's right. Doesn't the Black Tower also produce godly metal? The Black Tower could produce a piece of godly metal every year, just like how it produced spirit stones. However, if this piece of godly metal wasn't taken away, then its quality would increase by a certain amount every year. This caused Ling Han to hesitate. That was because even 100 pieces of low-grade godly metal couldn't compare to a single piece of high-grade godly metal. Forget it. In any case, the amount of level 2 godly metal that I need is vast, so I'll just give up on this idea, Ling Han thought. Ling Han said in his heart. As a person, one had to set their sights further. If I don't have money, then I'll just have to desperately concoct alchemical pills. Ling Han decided to slow down the progress of his cultivation. In any case, he had the reincarnation tree, and 1 day of cultivation was equivalent to a year of meditation for others. Moreover, he also had the demonic power source, so he didn't need to worry about accumulating origin power before he reached the Sun-Moon tier. Indeed, he could spend some time on alchemy. He desperately concocted alchemical pills as he waited for the Majestic Heaven sect to accept him as a disciple. Shui Yinyu frequently came here to cultivate, and she wanted to increase her cultivation level as much as possible. Naturally, she was borrowing the light of the reincarnation tree. Her goal was very clear, and that was to be chosen by the Majestic Heaven sect and be together with Ling Han. Otherwise, who knew how long it would be before she could see this damn pervert again? Moreover, this guy's brilliance definitely couldn't be concealed no matter where he went. She had to keep a close eye on him, lest some other woman took advantage of the situation and snuck in. However, she didn't have very high cultivation talent, and her battle prowess was also only 2 stars. In the Scarlet Heaven Academy, this would be very impressive, but the disciples that the Majestic Heaven sect accepted were all outstanding elites from over 100 great planets. 2 stars was definitely not enough. Thus, if she wanted to enter the Majestic Heaven sect, she would have to rely on something else. Age and cultivation level. Mountain River tier cultivators were definitely not rare in the Majestic Heaven sect. However, those who were below the age of 40 and had reached the high extreme of the Mountain River tier, or even the consummate level, even if they didn't have any battle prowess that surpassed their cultivation level, they could still be classified as supreme prodigies. My battle prowess was not as strong as yours, but my cultivation speed was faster than yours, and my cultivation level far surpassed yours. Thus I could still suppress you. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. He wrapped his arms around this seductive beauty, and said, "Wife, I'm very touched by your sincerity. Come give me a kiss." Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes at him, and said in annoyance, "I only want to enter the Majestic Heaven sect to improve myself." What does that have to do with you? This woman was really thin-skinned. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Wife, oh wife, this is your bad point. You're always unwilling to admit that you've been conquered by me. However, that's fine. I like to slowly train you and I enjoy this process." Ah! Shui Yinyu exclaimed in astonishment. This guy was making his moves on her again. Furthermore, there was no need to think about it. He was definitely occupying her 2 high points. She was both embarrassed and annoyed and said, "Damn pervert, don't be like this. Don't be like this." Ling Han chuckled. In truth, Shui Yinyu's breasts were also filled with beauty. The curves of her breasts were so voluptuous that his desire was aroused. He couldn't help but stretch out his hand and knead them until they were continuously changing shape. A terrifying fluctuation rippled out, causing the two of them to falter at the same time. They looked up into the sky. The bright moon hung high in the sky, but amidst the twinkling stars, a large star suddenly appeared, exuding an astonishing light. No, it was more like a fountain, spewing out brilliant light that illuminated the sky. Boom! Another wave of intense palpitation spread out. For some reason, the two of them were sure that this was coming from that large star, and had something to do with the light it was spewing out. What kind of star is this? Could it be that it has reached the end of its life, and is about to release its final brilliance? The immortal realm was completely different from a small world. A small world only had a single continent, and the stars in the sky were actually multiple meteors that elites could easily shake off. But in the immortal realm, every star was a large star, or even a sun, burning with divine flames that could burn heavenly body tier elites to ashes. Even great elites of the eternal river tier did not dare to enter. Every large star had its own lifespan, but it could be as long as billions or even tens of billions of years. Even elites of the heavenly body tier would find it difficult to reach the end of a large star's life. However, it was said that when a large star died in the end, there would be a great explosion. That was extremely frightening. Just think about how many cultivators could be born from a large star, and this power would burst forth in the short time of a few breaths. Probably even heavenly body tier elites would only be insta-killed. This was power that could destroy the world, and probably only Genesis tiers could resist it. And now, a large star in the sky suddenly blossomed with brilliant light, and it was extremely possible that it had reached the end of its life. What kind of existence was he? When had he ever been pointed at by someone? He immediately wanted to make a move, but just as he raised his hand, he was suddenly startled and said, "Honored one, show yourself. What if I don't want to see you?" Yi Shuang's lazy voice was heard. Then Honored one had better not interfere. This is the will of the 5 great sects. The beast snake king humphed. Little earthworms, I don't know how many I've trampled to death in the past, and you actually dare to be insolent in front of me. Yi Shuang said proudly. She still did not show herself. For the sake of that large earthworm, I don't want to become enemies with him. Get lost, lest you say that I bullied a junior in the future. Honored one, aren't your words too big? The beast snake king sneered. He was the strongest person in the world, with battle prowess as high as 12 stars of shattering void tier. Those that could rival him in the world could really be counted on one's fingers. Not to mention those freaks of the Purple Moon Empire. Each of them grasped 4 or 5 mystical powers, and could even use the power of the nation, and their battle prowess even surpassed 15 stars. Are you going to get lost or not? Yi Shuang directly rebuked. The beast snake king took a deep breath. Obviously, she was a shattering void tier elite. There was no doubt about this, but how many stars of shattering void tier battle prowess did she have? At the moment, he was having a difficult battle with the Purple Moon Empire, and if there was another shattering void tier enemy, it would be an additional burden. It was best not to add more enemies for himself, unless he had the confidence to kill her here. However, they were both in the shattering void tier, and if one side wanted to escape, it was still quite certain. At worst, they just burned their life force, and the explosive speed would be something that even immortals couldn't possibly catch up to. All right, I'll only bring this junior with me, he said, pointing at Ling Han. No. Yi Shuang flatly refused. Honored one, you're too domineering, the beast snake king said coldly. Did she really think he was afraid? Yi Shuang laughed loudly and said, I've always been domineering. Are you displeasing to the eye? If you have the ability, then come and fight me. How will I deal with you? The beast snake king trembled in anger. This woman was too much of a ruffian. He ignored her, and instead reached out to grab at Ling Han. Since he couldn't slap this monster to death, then he'd just capture him and bring him back to be suppressed. Such a physique could completely be used as a human pill, and after being refined it would definitely be a great tonic. Impudence. A slender hand struck out, endlessly enlarging, and blocked the large hand that the Beast Snake King had stretched out. Pong, the two collided, and instantly formed a visible wave in the skies, crashing down with a loud rumble. Wung wung wung, a hemispherical light barrier immediately appeared on the imperial capital below. Under this wave, it trembled as if it was about to be destroyed. Pa pa pa, a few places split open, and the shock wave instantly caused great destruction. Fortunately, because of the existence of this light barrier, the imperial capital only suffered the impact. Otherwise, it would have been razed to the ground. The shattering void tier was too strong. In the skies, a light barrier also appeared on that battleship. The hull of the battleship swayed as if it was in the water, and was affected by the waves. Yishuang Shuang, don't fight with him here. My imperial capital is about to be destroyed. Ling Han called out. That defensive light barrier just now was actually formed by the silhouette of the Black Tower above the imperial capital. This was the wonderful use of power of the nation. If he could unify the whole north region, the defense that was formed, probably even the Beast Snake King wouldn't be able to break through. Yishuang Shuang's figure flashed, and she was already stepping into the skies. She waved her long hair with great dissatisfaction, and said, "Brat, you've grown bolder, actually daring to order this lady around. Grandaunt, please suppress this old snake. That should be fine, right?" Ling Han said with a smile. Although it's not too sincere, this lady has such a helpful personality. It can't be helped, so I'll help you this once. Yishuang Shuang looked at the Beast Snake King, and revealed a bright smile. Little earthworm, if you don't leave now, there really won't be a chance. Who are you? The Beast Snake King looked at Yishuang Shuang solemnly. He actually couldn't tell the depth of her cultivation, which meant that her cultivation level was not beneath his. It was definitely impossible to surpass it. In this world, at most, one could only be in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Unless it was an immortal descending to the mortal realm. Reading on a cell phone was more refreshing. Chapter 821. This lady. Yishuang Shuang giggled. This lady is obviously the world's greatest beauty. Nonsense, Nyo is. Hunyo muttered from below, but now no one would care about what she said. The Beast Snake King stared at Yishuang Shuang, as if trying to find some clue from her. After a while he said, "This boy, I must take him away today. Then you have to be prepared to hand over your old life here." Yishuang Shuang said indifferently, extremely casual even when facing an existence like the Beast Snake King. However, the calmer she was, the more the Beast Snake King dared not be careless. If it were before, he would definitely be full of confidence, but with the appearance of the Purple Moon Empire, he finally knew what it meant by there was always someone better. Just the 8 kings alone were enough to beat them to a pulp. Could this woman also be an old monster from some generation? Yishuang Shuang's eyebrows involuntarily twitched, and she said, "Are you guessing which era's old monster I am? Fuck, you really are a monster." The Beast Snake King said inwardly, and his expression couldn't help but change slightly. "You actually dare to call me an old monster, stinky earthworm. You really need a beating." Yishuang Shuang was furious, and immediately charged towards the Beast Snake King. The Beast Snake King dared not be careless, and hurriedly faced her with rapt attention. Pung pung pung, the two fought fiercely as they soared towards the sky. Thus, although the shock waves from the battle were still overflowing, they deviated from the Imperial City's area. This made Ling Han nod internally. Yishuang Shuang wasn't just fooling around. He soared up and watched the battle from a close distance. In this world, aside from Shattering Void tier elites, he was the only one qualified to watch the battle between 2 Shattering Void tier elites at close range. Fight, fight! Hunyo appeared beside him, clapping her small hands. Right, forgot there was still a little monster. After a few moves, the Beast Snake King's expression was solemn, but he was greatly reassured. Yishuang Shuang was indeed very strong, not the slightest bit inferior to him, but also not surpassing him. After all, there were still many normal people in this world, and freaks like the Purple Moon Empire weren't common. Honored one, I admit that you are very strong, but you are still not qualified to fight against the 5 sections. I advise you to rein in your horse before it's too late. Otherwise, your lifetime's worth of cultivation will go down the drain, advised the Beast Snake King. Their strengths were on par with each other. If they were to fight to the death, either of them would die. However, He still wanted to wait until the reckoning to enter the divine realm and become a divine spirit. With such a bright future ahead, how could he be willing to fall? Ha 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 ha, frog at the bottom of a well. If this lady doesn't show her might, you really think you're something? Yi Shuang laughed. She bared her teeth, and 2 blood-red wings instantly grew out from her back. No, these shouldn't be considered wings. There were no feathers or scales. Rather, they were thin, fleshy wings like those of a bat. You, who exactly are you? The demon snake king could no longer remain calm. The moment the other party spread his wings, his aura immediately soared, instantly suppressing him. This made him think of the Lunar King and the others. Instantly, a strong shadow rose up in his heart. These days he had been dealing with those 8 freaks, and he couldn't forget them even if he wanted to. You think you're worthy to know? Yi Shuang said disdainfully. With a palm strike, innumerable stars instantly fell from the sky, forcibly tearing a hole in the sky. 15 stars of battle prowess. It was definitely 15 stars of battle prowess. Without another word, the demon snake king directly turned around and fled. In the shattering void tier, a difference of 1 star of battle prowess was a difference of heaven and earth, and that was a definite defeat. Moreover, his battle prowess was only 12 stars, which was a whole 3 stars lower than the other party's battle prowess. In that case, he would be suppressed with a flip of his palm. Flee, flee, flee. He returned to the warship, and hurriedly urged the warship to set off while opening the warship's defenses. With him and the Absolute Saber's double defense, they should still be able to fight their way out. Yi Shuang didn't plan to pursue either. She retracted her fleshy wings and stretched lazily, showing off her alluring curves. Vixen, Hu Niu said with a pout and a frown. Niu hated those with good figures showing off in front of her the most. Ling Han pointed at the warship ahead, and said, "Why aren't you chasing? This lady only promised to help your family, but didn't say that I would help you fight the bandits." Yi Shuang laughed mischievously, and changed the topic. "It's not impossible for this lady to act, but what benefits do you have to give? We're friends, so isn't mentioning benefits too dirty?" Ling Han said righteously. Don't play this trick with this lady. If you tell this lady all your secrets, this lady can make a move and wipe out whatever 5 sects in Purple Moon Empire. How about it? Yi Shuang tempted. Ling Han laughed and said, "In your dreams. The 5 sects have deep roots, and who knows how many more awesome characters they have. And for the Purple Moon Empire, although Fatima has never fought, being able to command the 8 kings, his strength must be terrifyingly strong. This lady is also very strong, okay?" Yi Shuang said, displeased. "Your current battle prowess is at most 15 stars. Wanting to sweep through the world, it's difficult." Ling Han shook his head. In a few years, Hellion Tianyun might be able to return to the peak, and battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier. Was he afraid or not? Yi Shuang snorted and said, "If it weren't for the suppression of this world, this lady would only need to use 1/10,000th of my power to sweep through this realm. Isn't that nonsense? There are so many people in the divine realm, and any god can do it, so there's no need to trouble you." Blue veins popped on Yi Shuang's forehead, and she said, "Brat, do you believe that this lady will beat you up first? Don't think that your physique is tough. This lady has ways to turn tempered fine steel into soft fingers." Ling Han didn't want to excessively provoke this witch, and said, Today's weather isn't bad. It's sunny and windy, so let's drink some tea." "Tea doesn't taste good, let's eat meat," Hu Niu immediately said. Chapter 822. Ling Han, however, cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Lord Lunar King has arrived. Sorry for not going out to meet you. Gedge." An extremely charming laughter came from the carriage, making one's heart feel as if it was being caressed by countless little hands, itchy and limp. "Great bewitching spirit," Yi Shuang and Hu Niu said at the same time. The carriage opened, and a charming and extremely beautiful woman walked out. In terms of appearance, Yi Shuang could match her, but in terms of charm, although Yi Shuang was similarly charming, she was overshadowed by her. This was a natural beauty, born to overturn the world, a true source of calamity. Naturally, it was the Lunar King. "Yo, little brother. The Lunar King greeted him coquettishly. Then she placed her hands on her waist and made an incredibly seductive pose that would make anyone blush. Hey, have I become younger and more beautiful again? Ling Han's understanding of women was once idiot level. So he only realized after 10,000 years that the heavenly phoenix divine maiden actually liked him. However, after being in close contact with Hellion Sun Shui for a long time, he obviously improved slightly. And the Lunar King is indeed getting younger and more beautiful day by day. He praised. This great bewitching spirit once fought with Ma Duo Bao over the issue of youth, so he had to go along with her on this topic. Although he could take a beating now, with an elite at the level of the Lunar King, even if she couldn't kill him in one move, it probably wouldn't be too hard to hurt him. The Lunar King was instantly all smiles, then walked towards Yi Shuang and said, "May I ask how I should address this big sister? I dare not be what big sister." Yi Shuang's pretty face immediately turned cold. You're much older than this lady. How is that possible? You can tell from this skin, big sister must be at least several tens of thousands of years older than this king. The Lunar King really dared to say it. The veins on Yi Shuang's forehead immediately bulged, but she also revealed a smile and said, "I heard you guys were buried for over 200,000 years, TSK. That's much older than this lady. You're the big sister." No, not big sister but old granny. The Lunar King giggled and said, "This king only slept for a while. With the time fluid slowing down the flow of time, I slept at most for a few years. I dare not be called old granny. Better return it to big sister." "Sister? You are the big sister. Your whole family are big sisters." The two women glared at each other, their anger rising. Ling Han didn't understand. It was just a form of address. What was the big deal about it? These two girls looked like they were about to fight. That destructive power would definitely surpass when Yi Shuang fought the Beast Snake King previously. Could even be said that it wasn't on the same level. Hu Niu, however, was excited and said in a small voice, "Fight, hurry up and fight. It's best if you can kill them all." Ling Han advised, "Lord Lunar King, it must have been a long journey. Why don't you go down and have a cup of tea?" Scram. The two women attacked at the same time. And with a bang, Ling Han was sent flying hundreds of kilometers away. He was just trying to mediate the fight. How did he end up in such a predicament? "Come, let me have a taste of your strength." Judge, this king has the same intention. The two women rose into the air again and began their battle. The two girls weren't completely muddle-headed, and still knew to avoid bringing disaster to the imperial capital below. However, they displayed all of their trump cards as soon as they made their move and fought fiercely in the sky. Blood devours the world. 8 crescent techniques. The two women clashed, and instantly unleashed powerful moves that were extremely terrifying. Ling Han was dazzled. This was the battle prowess of the Shattering Void tier. In comparison, the Beast Snake King was practically like a child. Their battle prowess should be 15 stars, about the same as the 15-eyed Corpse King and the giant silver spider. There's obviously only a difference of 3 stars of battle prowess, yet they're so much stronger than the Beast Snake King. I really can't imagine how terrifying that old dragon's 20 stars of battle prowess is, Ling Han mumbled. However, since one could appear with battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, why couldn't there be a second or a third? Who knew if the 5 sects had sealed such an elite? Hopefully not. After fighting for a while, the sky suddenly became quiet. The Lunar King and Yi Shuang landed one after another. Their clothes were somewhat tattered, revealing their snow-white skin, and even a glimpse of spring could be seen. However, the two women immediately took out cloaks from their spatial spirit tool and put them on, so that Ling Han couldn't feast his eyes anymore. "If this lady could go all out, I could crush you to death with a single finger." Yi Shuang's anger still hadn't dissipated. The Lunar King smiled and said, "You're indeed someone from the divine realm, but under the suppression of the realm's power, you only have 15 stars of battle prowess, which means that you broke through after reaching 15 stars, not stronger than this king." Ling Han was puzzled, and interrupted, "Shouldn't immortals descend to the lower realm have battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier?" Yi Shuang shook her head and said, "The suppression of the realm's power isn't so simple. In reality, the limit that this realm can accommodate is the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. But what kind of battle prowess you can reach at the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier depends on your own talent. Ling Han finally understood and said, your tier is suppressed to the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. But your battle prowess isn't suppressed to 20 stars of the Shattering Void tier. There was a huge difference between the two. For example, Helion Rong and Wuxia were both in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. But one had 10 stars of battle prowess, and the other 11 stars. If they fought to the death, Helion Rong would soon be killed by Wuxia, and wouldn't even be qualified to drag the other down with him. It was precisely because of this that even immortals descended to the lower realm couldn't suppress Helion Tianyun. That old dragon reached 20 stars of Shattering Void tier's battle prowess at the time, and was indeed enough to sweep through this realm. Oh right, Lunar King, the Middle States war is so urgent, why did you come here? Ling Han hurriedly changed the topic, not wanting the two girls to bicker again, and even come to blows. Oh, the 5 sects? They were already defeated, and there won't be any change even if I come again, the Lunar King said very proudly. I heard that you established a nation, and under His Majesty's suggestion, this king came to help you train the army. That's really great. Ling Han was pleasantly surprised. He only secretly learned some secrets of training troops from the Purple Moon Empire, but was far from proficient. Judge, then how should little brother repay this king? The Lunar King smiled charmingly, extremely flirtatious. You're not allowed to have any ideas on Ling Han. Hunyao immediately cut in front of Ling Han and spread her arms, looking like she was protecting her food. The Lunar King instantly laughed impudently, laughing so hard that her breasts surged, making Hunyao and Yi Shuang curse at the same time as the Great Demoness. The Great Demoness wouldn't stay for a long time. She brought a team of 100 people, and they were all elites among elites. Not only were they proficient in the art of training troops, their own strength was also extremely powerful, enough to help the Great Ling Empire sweep through the East and South region. Thus, the Lunar King invited Ling Han to the Middle State. The great battle with the 5 sects was about to begin, and Ma Duobao might even personally take part. Oh. Chapter 823. A large man turned around and shouted at the green-haired young man. Who do you think you are? How dare you meddle in my business? How dare you speak to young Master Wuck like this? A young man wielding a spear leaped out from among these young men. I'll send you on your way. He raised his spear and attacked. The large man hurriedly drew his saber to parry. Ding ding ding. They had only exchanged a few blows, and his expression changed drastically. Though they were both at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, his battle prowess was much weaker than his opponent's, and he immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. Moreover, his opponent's spear was deadly, and his killing intent was boiling. He could clearly feel the threat of death. So powerful. He was stunned and hurriedly roared. He began to fight desperately. Flashes of divine light burst out from his body, and his body suddenly expanded a good few times, turning into a giant that was 9 meters tall. Pooh, his palm was pierced by a spear, but it was as if there was no blood in his body. Not even a drop of blood spurted out from this spear. Moreover, it was as if he could not feel pain. He raised his saber with his other hand, and slashed at the spear-wielding man. The spear-wielding man couldn't help but be astonished. He hurriedly flicked his spear, and sent his opponent flying, dispersing the might of this strike. Then an expression of realization appeared on his face, and he said, You did not enlarge your body, but merely filled it up. You look bigger, but you are actually not an extension of your body. Thus, you were completely unaffected by my spear, and did not even bleed. So what if you know? The burly man sneered. My body is so huge right now. Do you still think you can hit my vitals? Do you know where my vitals are? Haha, I don't need to know where your vitals are. Under my frost spear, only death awaits you. The spear-wielding man activated the spear in his hand, and instantly, divine patterns bloomed on it. Boundless cold chi circulated, and it was as if the surrounding space was about to be turned into an ice cavern. The burly man's teeth involuntarily chattered, and a look of shock appeared in his eyes. A level 4 divine artifact. This spear-wielding man was clearly under the command of the green-haired youth, But how could a subordinate possess a level 4 divine artifact? What kind of concept was this? This group of youths was incredible, and their backgrounds were definitely shocking. It's just a misunderstanding, another burly man said. Since these two people are your friends, please forgive us for our recklessness. The spear-wielding man turned to look at the green-haired youth, yet the latter only smiled coldly and said, "You dare to offend a beauty, and you still want to live?" He instantly understood, and his spear unleashed its might, sweeping towards the 4 burly men at the same time. He was now incredibly powerful, and the might of his spear transformed the surroundings into a world of ice and snow. This might had even surpassed the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and added with his own battle prowess, it was equivalent to 2 great elites joining forces. Even though it was 1 against 4, he still had the upper hand, and it looked like he would only need a few moves to completely annihilate the 4 burly men. Ling Han couldn't help but nod. It was already very difficult for cultivators to possess battle prowess of 1 star, but god tools were different. That was because they could be nurtured by elites, and then bestowed upon their juniors to use, and they were completely capable of surpassing 4 or 5 stars. He was even more expectant. When the divine demon sword caught up to his cultivation level, how astonishing would its might be? It was comparable to divine metal, and definitely not as simple as merely possessing the ability to grow. Not long after, the 4 burly men had all been slaughtered. The spear-wielding man put away his weapon, and respectfully returned to stand behind the green-haired youth. This was astonishing. It should be known that this spear-wielding man's battle prowess was extremely astonishing, and he was completely capable of standing on his own. Now, however, he was like a servant. The green-haired youth walked over, and flashed a charming smile at Shui Yenyu, saying, "Miss, I frightened you." Ling Han shook his head in his mind. It seemed that he had gained another rival in love. This wife of his was truly a super femme fatale. No matter where she went, people would strike up a conversation with her. Moreover, all of them possessed high statuses. Previously, it had been Zhao Luan, and now it was a green-haired man. Most likely, his background wouldn't be inferior to Zhao Luan's. "Excuse me, but don't get so close to me," Ling Han said as he raised a hand to block the green-haired man. "How dare you?" The spear-wielding man immediately jumped out, and his spear was drawn again as he pointed it at Ling Han. "Zhang-sun, don't be so agitated." The green-haired youth smiled faintly, and lightly pressed down on the spear-wielding man's spear. "I'm Xia Wuk, and I'm from the tyrannical Xia Majestic Empire of the Great Length Star." The spear-wielding man immediately put away his spear, and respectfully said, "My apologies, young master. Please forgive me." Xia Wuk merely waved his hand, and said to Ling Han and Shui Yenyu, "How should I address you two?" "Ling Han, Shui Yenyu, my wife," Ling Han replied with a smile. Xia Wuk's expression involuntarily froze, and a dark expression appeared on his face. It wasn't that he hadn't seen beauties before, but this was the first time he had seen such a seductive beauty like Shui Yenyu. Adoration and possessiveness immediately welled up in his heart upon seeing her. However, Shui Yenyu was already taken. A mocking expression involuntarily appeared on his face as he glanced at Ling Han. How could a nobody like him be worthy of such a beauty? He chuckled coldly. Anyone with eyes would be able to tell who was better between him and Ling Han. He was naturally filled with confidence regarding this. He was the 67th son of the current emperor of the tyrannical Summer Majestic Empire, and he was also the youngest son. However, he was also the most outstanding descendant. He was only 507 years old, yet he had already reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. More importantly, he had been sent into a small world when he was in his 40s. In that small world, he had successfully split open the sky, and he had cultivated every cultivation level to perfection. He was filled with ambition, and he wanted to become the strongest prodigy in history. The situation here is unknown, and it could be extremely dangerous. "Why don't we travel together? That way we can take care of each other," he suggested with a smile. Shui Yenyu shook her head and said, "We've only met by chance, so there's no need for that." She naturally knew what he was thinking. However, her heart was already tied to Ling Han, so she naturally didn't want to cause any trouble. The two of them started to walk away, yet the spear-wielding man immediately stepped forward and blocked their path. "Zhang-sun, what are you doing?" Xiao Wuk asked coldly. The spear-wielding man hurriedly took a step back before kneeling on one knee and saying, "I was too rash." "Miss Shui will meet again," Xiao Wuk said with a confident smile. Shui Yinyu didn't reply. Meanwhile, Ling Han waved his hand without even turning his head around. "Young master." The spear-wielding man scooted over. He was slightly confused. Young master clearly liked this woman, so why didn't he just make her stay? With young master's identity, status, and talent in cultivation, what kind of woman wouldn't throw herself at him? "You don't understand," Xiao Wuk said with a meaningful smile. What was the point of obtaining a woman that he could obtain too easily? Did he lack beautiful women? However, a woman as charming as Shui Yinyu was like a fine wine that needed to be savored slowly. Not only did he want to obtain Shui Yinyu's body, but he also wanted to obtain her heart. Thus, he naturally didn't need to be overly hasty. "We'll meet again by chance." He waved his hand and said, "Follow me." Chapter 824. After this little interlude, Ling Han and the Lunar King were on their way. They quickly arrived at the region wall, but discovered that the region wall actually didn't exist anymore. "I found it troublesome, so I broke it," the Lunar King said indifferently. "Powerful. This should have been built with the help of the people of the Divine Realm after the reckoning 10,000 years ago, but she actually destroyed it, which showed how powerful this great demoness was." They were unimpeded and saw that this was already the territory of the Purple Moon Empire. The flag of the Purple Moon Empire was stuck above the city ahead, fluttering in the wind and appearing very mighty. Another 10 days later, they arrived at the capital city of the Purple Moon Empire. Ma Duobao personally came out to greet them, giving enough face to Ling Han. "Brother Ma, why do you think so highly of me?" Ling Han asked, puzzled. With the other strength, even if the sect leaders of the 5 great sects came, he wouldn't need to give them a second look. Ma Duobao laughed loudly and said, "Tan brother, I never misjudge people. You're destined to stir up a storm, and your achievements definitely won't be below mine." Ling Han was extremely pleased. He was also confident that he could achieve supreme achievements in the future, but before reaching such heights, he was treated as an equal by someone whose strength was far above his. This naturally made him feel very comfortable. "But, Brother Ma, can you stop calling me Tan brother?" "Sure, Tan brother." Ma Duobao readily accepted, but was a standard example of not changing despite repeated admonition. Ling Han was speechless and said after a while, "Brother Ma, on the use of power of the nation, I can give you some advice." "Oh, let's hear it." Ma Duobao didn't look down on Ling Han. Ling Han brought over all the information he heard from Yi Shuang, causing Ma Duobao to immediately sink into contemplation. "Your Majesty, our failure in splitting open the sky last time was your problem." The Lunar King cracked her fingers. "You damn fatty, you're really unreliable." Ma Duobao hurriedly raised his hands and said, "Even if I learned the correct posture last time, splitting open the sky would still fail." "Hijia." The Lunar King stared at Ma Duobao with a dangerous gaze, but did not make a move. Ma Duobao sighed and said, "Just the last time, this king nearly exploded from the power of the nation. Even if the power of the nation could be strengthened by 10 times, this king would not be able to withstand it." The Lunar King was startled, and after a while she suddenly jumped up, grabbed Ma Duobao's face and said, "You turned yourself into a damn fatty. Are you cultivating some strange cultivation technique to increase your endurance? My beloved subject is indeed smart." Ma Duobao's face had already been squeezed until it was completely deformed, but he was still as amiable as ever. He chuckled and said, "Back then we had yet to unify the sea region, but we had already reached our limits, so we did not let you go on another expedition into the sea region. Unfortunately, my strength is still not enough to split open the sky. So this time this king recultivated my physique to be able to withstand even stronger power of the nation." The Lunar King instantly thumped her hands and stamped her feet, and said, "Give me back my handsome and dashing emperor. Although the damn fatty is somewhat pleasing to the eye after a long time, it's not as comfortable as the original emperor." She immediately scuttled to Ling Han's side. picked him up and said fiercely, "Little brother, don't ever learn from that damn fatty. This king does not want to meet another damn fatty." Ling Han hurriedly raised his hand and said with a smile, "Definitely, definitely." He indeed did not want to become a damn fatty. However, what cultivation technique did Ma Duobao actually cultivate to actually increase his physique by fattening his physique? After improvement, perhaps just the power of the nation of the middle state alone would be able to fill me to death again. Ma Duobao stroked his chin. From Ling Han's experience, the tree totem and gathering the hearts of the people were enough to increase the power of the nation tenfold. The middle state was the holy land of martial art. One state could rival 4 regions, and if the power of the nation was increased tenfold, then the effect would definitely be 2 times or even 3 times more than the entire continent united before. Although his physique had increased, was it as strong as 2 or 3 times? Let's give it a try first. Ma Duobao immediately began the creation of the totem. This represented the image of a nation, so he had to consider it carefully. Now the Purple Moon Empire had already occupied more than 90% of the land in the middle state, and there was only a small area that the 5 great sects had yet to change their flag. However, the 5 sects were all located not far from each other, and they could reinforce each other, so it would be extremely, extremely difficult to break through. In such a small area, over 100 shattering void tier elites were gathered, and there were also great killing weapons like the Absolute Saber and the Mountain and River Axe. It was definitely not easy to deal with, and Ma Duobao had to personally act. The final great battle was not far away. Taking advantage of the fact that the battle had not started yet, Ling Han decided to make a trip to Cold City first. There were 2 cold spear associations there, and it involved a few of his disciples, so there was a need to clarify. He brought Zhu Xian'er, Hu Niu, and the others with him, and arrived at Cold City after a few days. Before this, Ling Han only knew that the Cold Spear Association would be in Cold City, but he did not have a very deep impression of where Cold City was. Only when he arrived here did he involuntarily reveal a dazed expression, as if he had traveled through time and returned to the past. Cold City was the eternal light city of 10,000 years ago, and also the place where he lived. He had never thought that after 10,000 years, this city would still be preserved, and had not been destroyed. Ling Han could still recognize that some of the damage on the city walls were exactly the same as they had been 10,000 years ago. "Ling Han, what's wrong?" Hu Niu asked, shaking his hand. "It's nothing." Ling Han broke into a smile, and led Hu Niu into the city. He headed straight for the Cold Spear Association. However, there were a total of 2 Cold Spear Associations in Cold City. One was in the south of the city, and was called the Southern Spear Association, while the other was in the north, and was called the Northern Spear Association. The 2 Cold Spear Associations both claimed that they were the real Cold Spear Association, and often fought against each other, and were as incompatible as fire and water. Ling Han entered from the East City Gate, and the distance between the 2 Cold Spear Associations was more or less the same. He fished out a copper coin, smiled and said, "Heads to the Southern Spear Association, tails to the Northern Spear Association." The result was tails. He walked neither hurriedly nor slowly, but the city was only so big. Not long after, he still arrived at the Northern Spear Association. "I want to see someone who can speak," Ling Han said to the guard at the entrance. "Who are you?" the guard countered, a disdainful smile on his face. This was natural. Just anyone would run over and ask to see their boss. What did they take their boss to be? Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "I'm called Ling Han. You can just go and report like this." Ling Han. The guard was startled. The members of the Cold Spear Association obviously understood that the meaning of their existence was to collect anything related to Ling Han, and obtain it at all costs. Of course, this Ling Han was the Alchemy Emperor from 10,000 years ago, and not this youngster in front of them. In the hearts of every member of the Cold Spear Association, the Ling Han from 10,000 years ago was a supreme existence, like a god that could not be profaned. This person actually dared to call himself Ling Han. This was too despicable. He glanced at Ling Han and said, "All right, I'll go in and report for you, Hung. It'd be strange if they didn't invite an expert to beat this guy until even his own mother wouldn't recognize him." Chapter 825. Ling Han waited at the door. So many years had passed anyway, so he didn't mind waiting a little longer. Hu Niu, on the other hand, kicked a rock out of boredom. Pa, she seemed to be a bit addicted, kicking harder and harder, finally causing trouble. Aya, who is it? Daring to sneak attack this young master. A young man walked over while holding his forehead, grimacing in pain. Hu Niu saw and instantly stuck out her tongue, hiding behind Ling Han, then pointed at Zhu Xian'er and said, "It's this woman who hit you with a rock." Niu saw it clearly. Who would suspect a child? That young man followed Hu Niu's finger to Zhu Xian'er, and was just about to fly off the handle, but immediately revealed a stunned expression. This woman was too beautiful. Her beauty was unparalleled in absolute cold city. In an instant it seemed like his forehead didn't hurt anymore. He hurriedly put on what he thought was his most elegant smile, and said, "I'm Feng Yixio, what's Mrs. name?" Zhu Xian'er only glanced at him indifferently, and said, "Meeting by chance, just passers-by, no need to report your name. Character, I like it." Feng Yixio turned his face and said to himself, then turned back, his smile even brighter. Being able to meet in the vast sea of people. Isn't this a kind of fate? "Miss, your beauty is too dazzling. My eyes can only feel your existence." Zhu Xian'er directly ignored him, lest he took advantage of the situation and pestered her endlessly. "Miss, your beauty is poison, but I gladly endure it. I've been conquered by you. Please let me use the rest of my life to love you." Feng Yixio blurted out words of love one after another. Definitely a veteran in the brothel, not repeating a single word. With his handsome appearance and sweet mouth, he believed that there would be countless women who would willingly jump into his gentle trap. Unfortunately, this had no effect on Zhu Xian'er, and instead made her expression colder and colder. "Idiot, why so much nonsense, just knock her out and carry her home." Hu Niu couldn't go on anymore, and jumped out to give advice. "This isn't too good, right?" Feng Yixio scratched his head, smiling foolishly. "Trust Niu." Hu Niu encouraged. Feng Yixio clapped his hands and said, "Let's do it." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. "What do you want?" Feng Yixio immediately shuddered and said, "I have no interest in men. Don't play dirty jokes with me." "Damn, is this guy a clown?" Ling Han snickered coldly and said, "Since you've said so, then I'll have to play with you. You don't be rash. I'm not that kind of person. Furthermore, I'm very powerful, so don't ask for trouble." Feng Yixio hurriedly readied his sword, his expression as if to say, "You're a pervert, don't come near me." Ling Han reached out and grabbed at the other party in an extremely casual manner. "Damned pervert move." Feng Yixio struck out with his sword. Xiao, a sword ray slashed out, slicing towards Ling Han's wrist. Although this person was inexplicably unreliable, he really did have some skill. There were not many people who could condense sword radiance at this age. However, compared to Ling Han, the two of them were not on the same level at all. Ling Han bent his hand and grabbed the other party's wrist. He said with a smile, "Guess I'll steam you or braise you? Mother." Feng Yixio's whole body was covered in goosebumps, and he hurriedly exerted force to struggle free, but Ling Han's hand was like an iron hoop, making him unable to move at all, and could only stare helplessly. "Don't call me mother, call me big brother, and I'll let you go," Ling Han said with a smile. "You think you're worthy of this young master calling you big brother?" Feng Yixio snorted, and with a shake of his left hand, another sword actually appeared, stabbing towards Ling Han. Ling Han let go, and then grabbed at Feng Yixio's left hand. He caught it head-on. Feng Yixio turned pale with fright. How could this person's attack be so fast? He roared angrily, and his right hand slashed out again. This time he used his full power, and even his hair stood up like needles. Sword intent materialized, and fiercely charged towards Ling Han. His opponent's physique was extremely tough, so his spirit was definitely not stable enough. If he was hit by this attack, he would definitely hold his head and groan. How could there be such a monster in this world, who had cultivated both physique and spirit to the extreme? Ling Han smiled slightly and his sword heart moved. Feng Yixio's sword intent instantly collapsed, and the other also seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. His face instantly paled, and even his expression was distorted, appearing to be in incomparable pain. He released his hand, and Feng Yixio curled up on the ground, his whole body convulsing. The attack on his spirit was not light. However, to him this was no less than a kind of tempering. If he could endure it, the toughness of his spirit would definitely be able to advance a step further. Young Master Feng. At this time 2 people walked out from the door. One was the guard who had previously gone in to make the report, and the other was a tall and slender old man. He looked to be in his 60s or 70s, and had a rather dignified bearing, but at this moment, his face was filled with agitation. With a quick stride, he rushed before Feng Yixio and helped him up. He carefully examined him, and only when he discovered that there were no injuries on the other's body did he slightly calm down. The old man looked towards Ling Han, and a hint of coldness appeared in his eyes as he said, "Was it you who injured young Master Feng?" Ling Han smiled and said, "The term injured is too inaccurate. It should be said that we sparred, and he was no match for me." "Humph, coming to my Cold Spear Association and still daring to injure someone, how dare you?" the old man said coldly. His right hand stretched out, and it instantly turned green, exuding a metallic texture, with multiple vein-like patterns flashing on it. This old man's cultivation level was in the deity transformation tier, and his strength was really not low. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Your status is also not low. Then let me ask you, do you have any impression of the names Zhang Yufeng, Yun Yongwang, Kang Xiu Yuan?" "Humph, it's useless even if you bring out the most powerful backer. Today no one can save you." The old man leaped out and struck out towards Ling Han, who before the palm had even arrived, a gust of wind had already arrived. Origin power was oppressive, and the destructive power was extremely shocking. Ling Han pressed out with his right hand, and the old man was instantly sent flying. Pung 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 pung. At least a dozen or so walls were broken by him before he finally stopped, and directly fainted. This time he should really be taken seriously, right? Tung tung tung. Many people rushed out from the manor, and surrounded Ling Han, but none of them made a move. Humph. A terrifying aura circulated, and a figure also walked out. "Greetings, 7th Elder." Everyone half knelt in greeting. That was a white-haired old man, but his spirit was hale and hearty, and his eyes shone brightly. He stared at Ling Han and said, "Young man, you are quite courageous, to actually dare to come to the Cold Spear Association and behave atrociously." "Behave atrociously?" Ling Han shook his head. "I was only defending myself. However, my patience is limited. If no one is willing to have a proper discussion with me, then I can only first knock you all over and let you all calm down." Chapter 826. How arrogant. You're just a little deity transformation tier. The 7th Elder sneered. "Young man, you're too proud. Let this old man teach you how to be a man." Ling Han said, "You're quite arrogant. Don't be a frog at the bottom of a well, thinking that the world is so big. You should know that there are always people better than you." Ha ha ha. The 7th Elder was so angry that he laughed. If their ages were exchanged, then what he said would make some sense, but now a young man was actually teaching him a lesson, making him speechless. His eyes turned cold, and he didn't bother to say anything more to Ling Han. Otherwise, he would really be angered to death, so he directly reached out to grab Ling Han. He was at the heaven tier, so it was easy for him to deal with a junior in the deity transformation tier. There was no need for him to go to the sky to fight. His opponent couldn't fight back at all, and would only be taken down in one move. Naturally, he couldn't cause any damage. He reached out with his right hand, and the will of martial art of the heaven tier spread, forming a terrible pressure. Weaker deity transformation tier warriors even directly lay down under this pressure. Ling Han didn't dodge. This was very normal for others. When a heaven tier elite made a move, would there be any room for this kid to dodge? Under the pressure of the will of martial art, he naturally had the right to be captured. When the old man's palm reached him, Ling Han moved. His speed was extremely fast, and he flicked the old man's palm. The 7th Elder's expression suddenly changed. Although his opponent's strength wasn't as strong as his, the will of martial art was extremely frightening. It turned into a needle that pierced into his body, making him feel pain. He took 7 steps back and raised his hand, but found that his hand was trembling, and he couldn't even clench it. Too frightening. Was this young man a monster? A casual attack almost disintegrated his battle strength. Hey, why did the seventh elder stop? I don't know. Just now, the seventh elder rushed over and then retreated. Did he block the seventh elder's attack? Are you kidding me? With the seventh elder's cultivation, he almost stands among the strongest in the world. How could he not take care of a young man? Everyone was talking about it. With their eyesight, they naturally didn't know what had just happened. Ling Han smiled and said, "How about it? Can we sit down and have a good talk?" The seventh elder stared at Ling Han for a long time before he finally said, "You are too insignificant to the Cold Spear Association. This old man cannot stop you, but that does not mean that no one can." What? Hearing this, everyone was shocked. How could they believe that even the seventh elder couldn't block this young man? This guy was at most 20 years old. How could he be so strong? Could it be some old monster who could maintain his youthful appearance? Ling Han smiled and said, "I can't be bothered to wait here for you all to come out one by one." Finished speaking, he started walking towards the mansion. "Halt!" Everyone shouted loudly. How could outsiders be qualified to enter the Cold Spear Association? This was blasphemy. You can't stop him. Let him in, and there will naturally be people who will teach him how to behave, said the seventh elder. Everyone nodded. The Cold Spear Association had no lack of elites. Even if Heaven Tier elites could not stop Ling Han, could it be that Shattering Void Tier elites could not as well? Not long after, pung 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 sounds were heard from inside. A battle should have broken out, but after a while there was no more movement. After another while, an old man ran out with a bloody nose and swollen face. What, even the fifth elder was defeated? Everyone exclaimed in shock. This young man was a bit strong. The seventh elder hurriedly asked about the battle situation. How many moves did that Ling Han use to defeat the fifth elder? The fifth elder's face was completely red, and he paused for a while before saying, "This old man was defeated by a little girl about 10 years old. He actually wanted to add some years to Hunyo's age to make his defeat slightly better, but she was really too young, so he really couldn't add any more years." Pooh! Everyone spluttered. This was the fifth elder, and his strength was even stronger than the seventh elder's. But not only did he lose, he had also lost to the little girl they had seen before. Who hadn't expected Hunyo? However, who would have thought that such a little girl was actually an elite? Pung! The sounds of battle were heard again from inside, and similarly not long after, another two old men ran out. Both of them were wounded, and one of them even had his face scratched. Third elder. Second elder. Everyone was shocked. Even these two elders were defeated. They had the title of the strongest battle prowess below the Shattering Void tier. Yet they were still no match. Could it be that Ling Han and the others had the battle prowess of the Shattering Void tier? But when they asked, the two elders were defeated by Ling Han and Hunyo respectively, and there was not the slightest bit of exaggeration. When they said that, the whole crowd fell silent. Ha 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 ha. I heard that someone barged into your fake Cold Spear Association. It was at this moment that over a dozen people walked over. In the lead were 3 old men, and behind them were 11 youngsters. If Ling Han was here, he would definitely be able to recognize that one of the young girls was Mu Fei Yao. Obviously, these people were all from the Southern Spear Association. Nonsense, you guys are the fake Cold Spear Association. The people on the Northern Spear Association side all rebuked. Which was the real Cold Spear Association? This was an overriding issue of principle, and it was even more serious than Ling Han barging into the manor. Bullshit, you guys from the fake Cold Spear Association are shameless. The people on the Southern Spear Association side also started cursing. Whenever the two sides met, they would argue for a long time because of this issue. In the past, they even fought fiercely, almost causing both sides to be destroyed. Thus, the two sides later agreed that Cold City was a holy land, and definitely would not fight here. Moreover, because of Cold City's special status, the two Cold Spear Associations even agreed that if anyone dared to destroy Cold City, both sides would join forces to exterminate them. Come, you guys have encountered a problem. Do you need our help? The Southern Spear Association said. We can solve it ourselves. We don't need your fake Cold Spear Association's help. The people of the Northern Spear Association were obviously unwilling to accept help, or else wouldn't they be suppressed by the other side? They also had this kind of confidence, because the First Elder was an elite of the Shattering Void tier, and also the Northern Spear Association's #1 elite. In the depths of the manor, Ling Han and an old man were both sitting cross-legged, each with a cup of fragrant tea in front of them. Meanwhile, Zhu Xian'er and Hu Niu were both sitting behind Ling Han. Zhu Xian'er was still fine, looking gentle and refined like a young lady from a noble family, but Hu Niu could not sit still. She simply lay on the floor, supporting her small head with her hand as she stared blankly. That old man was naturally the Northern Spear Association's #1 elite, the First Elder. This First Elder was very calm, and did not start a fight. Instead, he invited Ling Han to sit down and drink some tea, and said, "Young friend, you are only 20 years old, and have already reached such heights. This kind of natural talent is really rare since ancient times. First Elder is too kind. I would like to ask First Elder for guidance on a matter, and I hope First Elder can tell me," Ling Han said very politely. "If people respect me, I will respect them tenfold. May I know what matter young friend would like to ask for guidance on?" the First Elder asked. The founder of the Cold Spear Association. After reaching their level, they had truly become arrogant. This wasn't arrogance, but rather the confidence of invincibility. No matter how many people there were, they would still have an invincible heart, and they would be able to suppress anyone that came their way. Thus, they had only treated the other 3 people as their opponents. They had never paid attention to the people in the second echelon or below. Were they worthy? Now, however, someone had emerged from the second echelon and was gradually catching up to them. However, this wasn't the important point. The important point was that this person was actually only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. If he truly caught up to them, how could they endure it? Needless to say, Xiao Wux's face had already turned green. He hadn't taken Ling Han seriously before, yet Ling Han had caught up to them now. Wasn't this a slap to his face? He was a prodigy, and he had always been the one to slap others' faces. When had he ever been the one to be slapped in the face? He gritted his teeth and forcibly increased his speed. This was extremely taxing on him. If this was already the 10th stage, then he could just muster up his strength and charge out in a single breath. However, this was only the 5th stage. If he unleashed his full strength here, then he would definitely run out of stamina. It was difficult to say whether he would be able to walk out of this stone statue formation. However, this was even more unbearable for him to allow Ling Han to catch up to him. He knew that Shui Yinyu was definitely watching from the side. His pride wouldn't allow this. His battle prowess was truly powerful. Golden light radiated from his body, and even his arms had become a faint golden color. It was as if they had been forged from godly metal. He was completely unscathed as he took the attacks of the stone statues head-on. This kind of state naturally couldn't last for long. Thus, Xiao Wuk unleashed his full speed and charged forward. He wanted to take advantage of this invincible state to increase the distance between him and Ling Han. Even if he exited this state later, he would still have enough time to recover. "Stupid bird," Ling Han said in his mind. Xiao Wuk was treating him as a formidable opponent, yet he didn't take him seriously at all. If he didn't form his 5th mountain river and become a 10-star genius, how could he possibly view him as a rival? Although Ling Han hadn't taken this step yet, he firmly believed that he could definitely become a rival. He had a feeling that this stone statue formation was most likely prepared for 10-star geniuses. After reaching the consummate level of the mountain river tier, each increase in power would allow one to pass a stage. 10 stars meant 10 stages. Therefore, no one should be able to pass through here except for him. Of course, he wasn't a 10-star genius. In fact, he was still very far from the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, Hu told him to have a powerful physique and freakish recovery ability. Thus, there was a possibility that he could pass this stone statue formation. What he was more curious about was whether there would be any rewards for passing this stone statue formation. The 6th stage. The attacks of the stone statues became more and more violent. Power was only a part of one's battle prowess, and this saying was fully manifested here. However, this was also an extremely special situation. After all, cultivators definitely couldn't be like this. You were clearly only at the Mountain River tier, so how could you possibly comprehend the regulations of the Sun Moon tier? This wasn't a matter of time. Rather, it was a matter of cultivation level. At this stage, there was no longer such a saying as how many teams there were. After all, there were only 5 people left. Ling Han, Xia Wuk, Xiao Sisi, Su Jing, and Duan. These were the 5 great geniuses. Who would be the first super genius to be eliminated? Who would last until the end? Who would be able to charge out of the stone statue formation? The people outside were all incredibly curious. They could clearly leave first, yet none of them were willing to do so. They were all waiting here, determined to witness the final moment. The 6th stage was extremely stressful. Even Ling Han was slightly wary of the stone statue's attacks. As long as they landed a solid punch, even Ling Han would bleed. Even he was feeling this way, so the pressure on the other 4 people was naturally even greater. However, the other 4 people had an advantage in cultivation level. Regardless of whether it was in terms of power or battle prowess, they were all far superior to Ling Han. Thus, although their defenses were inferior to Ling Han's, they could make up for it with their powerful attacks. They wouldn't give the stone statues any chance to strike them. The 5 of them were sweating profusely. Right now, they were not only competing in strength but also in willpower. Chapter 828. Pong the rabbit flew extremely fast and heavily smashed onto 8th Elder's face. It wasn't over yet. The rabbit had its own attack attribute, and with a flurry of claws, 8th Elder's face was instantly scratched and blood flowed. Everyone was speechless. At least the people of the Northern Spear Association knew that Hunyo was actually extremely powerful, but never would they have thought that a rabbit was also so powerful, able to put the 8th Elder of the Southern Spear Association into such a sorry state. Io scared Uncle Rabbit to death. Fortunately, you're not injured. The rabbit trembled all over, and finally breathed a sigh of relief, patting its chest with lingering fear. This made everyone exasperated. You definitely weren't injured. The one injured was that 8th Elder. Poor 8th Elder was also a heaven tier elite, so how could he be humiliated to such a sorry state in public? Also, how could a rabbit open its mouth to speak? 8th Elder trembled in anger, pointing a trembling finger at Hunyo. He couldn't catch his breath and almost fainted. Truly humiliating. He, a dignified heaven tier elite, actually ended up in such a sorry state, truly detestable and hateful. What old? Uncle Rabbit didn't even cry out for injustice. You old fart, your skin is really hard. You almost broke Uncle Rabbit's claws. Can you afford to pay for it? The rabbit glared at him with a fierce look. 8th Elder instantly shifted his hatred onto the rabbit. This lowly rabbit practically had its own halo of mockery, making people gnash their teeth in anger once it opened its mouth. Die! He flew out, swatting at the rabbit. Little ancestor, save me, the rabbit screamed. It was only in the deity transformation tier, but its bloodline was powerful so it could scratch and injure 8th Elder previously. But now, in a head-on confrontation, how could it be a match? The rabbit ran quickly and with a shio hid behind Hunyo, then poked its head out, pointed at 8th Elder with its claws, and said, "Little ancestor, hit him." Hunyo rolled up her sleeves. Fighting and whatnot was her favorite. 8th Elder's attack missed, and he immediately turned around, charging towards Hunyo again. With a punch, endless brilliance circulated, and martial art intent overflowed, extremely terrifying. Enraged, he no longer cared that he was in Hanqing and attacked with all his might. Right now, he wished that he could kill everyone in order to silence them. This way, no one would know that he had embarrassed himself. The attack was incomparably terrifying. Hunyo grabbed the rabbit with a backhand motion, and once again threw it at 8th Elder. Fuck, why is it Uncle Rabbit again? The rabbit shrieked. It once again smashed onto 8th Elder's face. Its bloodline was powerful, and its physique was also different from a normal rabbit's. This smash caused 8th Elder to feel dizzy and disoriented, but it was completely fine. Shwa shwa shwa, it once again scratched at 8th Elder's face, and only then did it manage to escape. Eighth Elder pointed at Hunyo and Rabbit, and actually couldn't catch his breath. Instantly, his body tilted, and he slid onto the ground. Eighth Elder fainted. The people of the Southern Spear Association rushed up and exclaimed in surprise. All of them had strange expressions on their faces. In their eyes, Heaven-tier warriors were almost invincible in the world, but such a strong warrior was angered to the point of fainting by a little girl and a talking rabbit. Who could accept this? It was like a dream. Gidge. Hunyo held her belly and laughed loudly, clapping her hands as hard as she could. Fun, really fun. And who's next to play with? Her gaze swept back and forth between Third Elder and Fourth Elder's faces, causing the two old guys to feel immense pressure. Just now they saw Hunyo attack with their own eyes. Her attacks were without any fancy tricks, and could only be described with one word: speed. But it was this speed that made them feel shocked, and their hearts went cold. Although Eight's strength was slightly weaker than theirs, it wasn't by much. If it were them, they would also suffer heavily. Ling Han laughed and said, "Now there's still someone who wants to force me to change my name?" The people of the Southern Spear Association dared to be angry, but did not dare to speak, but Eighth Elder fainted from anger, and the other two elders suddenly became mute, so what could they say? "Let's go." Ling Han snapped his fingers. "Let's go." Hunyo jumped up cheerfully, grabbed the rabbit's long ears and dragged it away. "Ah, you're abusing an animal," the rabbit screamed. Mu Feiyao's beautiful eyes widened, her face full of shock. When she first saw Ling Han, the latter's strength was extremely weak, and she could crush him with a finger, but now that she just advanced into the flower blossom tier, the latter had already grown to a height that she could only look up to. Thinking of the time when she was spanked by Ling Han, her pretty face couldn't help but feel hot, as if her butt was also a bit itchy. Ling Han returned to the capital city of the Purple Moon Empire. A round trip took about a dozen days, and Ma Duobao should have also settled the totems matter. It was time for the final battle with the 5 sections. He didn't want to miss such a good show. Sure enough, when he returned to the Imperial Palace, he saw that there was already a sword silhouette above the Imperial Palace. This was a totem, and Ling Han could sense it. Now, this sword had condensed a considerable amount of the people's will, enough to suppress a deity transformation tier elite. So powerful only a few days had passed. However, the Purple Moon Empire was established much earlier than the Great Ling Empire. Now, it was only giving the citizens an object of faith, so it was naturally easy to condense the people's will, pushing the totem to a considerable height in a few days. The middle state was large in the first place, and added with the overall high level of martial art, it probably wouldn't be long before this totem could rival the Shattering Void tier. Hee Tan brother, it's as I thought. After forming the true power of the nation, just the middle state alone is enough to fill me up, Ma Duobao said with a sigh. Ling Han frowned and said, "Brother Ma, you recultivated your physique, and still can't bear such powerful power of the nation? How much power of the nation you can bear is determined by 2 aspects. One is your own cultivation tier, and the other is the toughness of your physique. In terms of cultivation tier, I'm already in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, and it's impossible to improve further, so I can only strengthen my physique. My physique has already reached the level of 10th tier rare metal, but it's also reached the limit." Ma Duobao shook his head, appearing somewhat regretful. However, he immediately smiled and said, "However, compared to last time, the power of the nation I can accommodate has at least doubled, so there should be a 30% chance of splitting open the sky." Only 30%? Ling Han was surprised. Firstly, it was because of Ma Duobao's strength. The latter's battle prowess definitely surpassed 15 stars, and his physique also reached the level of 10th tier rare metal, which was practically invincible in the world. However, with such strength and physique, plus the support of the power of the nation, splitting open the sky still only had a 30% chance of success, which was even more shocking. What if it was him? Ling Han asked himself. As long as his tier advanced into the Shattering Void tier, then his physique would reach the level of godly metal, and the power of the nation he could accommodate would far surpass Ma Duobao's. His own battle prowess wouldn't be inferior either, and comparing the two, what were his chances of splitting open the sky? Chapter 829. Brother Ma, if it's impossible, why not leave it to me? Ling Han made a cutting gesture towards the sky. Splitting open the skies wasn't a joke. Heaven and earth had a spirit and was an independent individual. Even so, it wouldn't be willing to fuse with a new individual, even if it was an upgrade. As the saying went, it was better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox. This was the principle. If splitting open the skies succeeded, then so be it. But if it failed, heaven and earth would definitely bear a grudge, and they would be struck by lightning. Otherwise, how could the Purple Moon Empire be destroyed in the past? At worst, they could open it again after a while, and as they continued, who knew, they might succeed one time. They slept for hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps with the intention of avoiding the backlash of heaven and earth. Ma Duobao shook his head and said, "There's not much time left for us. If the higher-ups make a move, we'll be passive." When it was time to concoct the realm pill, people from the immortal realm would come, and although immortals could only descend to the shattering void tier, their battle prowess was definitely powerful, and they were basically impossible to kill. If they swarmed up by relying on numbers, how could they split open the skies? Ling Han nodded. What they lacked now was time. The next day, they broke camp and moved, charging towards the 5 sections. From a mortal's point of view, the 5 sects were separated by tens of thousands of miles, ridiculously far. But in the eyes of shattering void tier elites, this distance was only a day's journey. Thus, the 5 sects were actually very close, and it was very easy to support each other. When Ma Duobao arrived at the front lines, the remaining 7 kings all gathered, joining him and the Lunar King, and then set out towards the Heaven Sword sect. Needless to say, the elites of the 5 sects would definitely gather at the Heaven Sword sect to launch a great battle against the Purple Moon Empire. Besides the Heavenly Astral King, the Lunar King, and the Flame King, the other 5 kings were respectively the Great Water King, Justice Mountain King, Clear Sun King, Pure Golden King, and Eternal Peace King. The 8 of them all had battle prowess of 15 stars of shattering void tier, shockingly terrifying. Along the way, there were naturally people obstructing them, but the 8 kings attacked casually, obviously sweeping through them, approaching step by step towards the gates of the Heaven's Sword sect. There weren't many people in their group. Aside from Ling Han and the others, Ma Duobao only brought the 8 kings and 1,000 elite soldiers. However, these 1,000 elite soldiers were all high-level Heaven tier elites, and added with the fact that they were proficient in combined attacks, their battle prowess was enough to rival high-level shattering void tier elites. The disciples of the Sky Sword sect were routed along the way, and soon the army arrived at the mountain gate of the Sky Sword sect. He couldn't go any further because of the protection of the formation. "This king is here." Pure Golden King walked out, took out a golden spear, and held it horizontally in front of his chest. His eyes turned into 2 golden stars, and a ball of light condensed on the tip of the spear. At first, it was only the size of an egg, but no matter how much he condensed it, it only became the size of a watermelon. Ling Han, on the other hand, felt his blood run cold. The power of this attack was absolutely terrifying. Of the 3 styles of black origin, the last style was called formation breaking. It required one to stand still and gather strength for several minutes. Once it was unleashed, one's strength would be completely depleted. If this was used in battle, it was simply courting death. If it could be used to break the defense of the formation, it was a wonderful move. Was there any defense in the world that could not be broken? It was just that the strength was not enough. Therefore, the name of formation breaking was worthy of its name. Pure Golden King's attack had the same effect. During battle, he would never use it against the enemy, but now that he had the protection of his teammates, he naturally had no scruples. It allowed him to slowly condense his strength and blast out the most powerful blow. At least 5 minutes later, Pure Golden King finally took a step forward, but with one step, he had already arrived in front of the defensive light shield formed by the formation and stabbed with his spear. Poof! The tip of the spear stabbed into the defensive formation, and suddenly there was an infinite brilliance, dazzling, making people unable to open their eyes. Boom! The ground was trembling, the Sky Sword Mountain was also shaking, and the light shield was on the verge of collapse, but in the end it stabilized. As strong as Pure Golden King was, a blow that had been accumulating strength for 5 minutes actually failed to break the defensive formation. Ha 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 ha. The other 7 kings burst into laughter, one after another, all of them in a mess. Old 7, you have regressed. Why can't you destroy the defensive formation with one shot? Is it because you worked too hard last night? Alas, young people should know how to control themselves. Don't always think about that all day long. The 7 kings ridiculed one after another, mercilessly. Pure Golden King's face was solemn, and he said, "This formation is indeed much stronger than when we first came." Ma Duobao opened his mouth and helped his beloved general out of trouble, saying, "This is normal. After being swept by us in the past, the 5 major sects will definitely learn from the painful experience and strive to strengthen the defensive formation. Therefore, it is normal that you can't break this formation. It just blocked one blow from this king. Let this king come again, and within a day, I will definitely be able to break this formation." Pure Golden King said, unconvinced. "How can I waste so much time for you?" Lunar King swayed with thousands of charm and walked out. "Let this king do it. Fourth sister, let me do it." Pure Golden King refused to give in. What a joke, this was related to his face. "What, you've grown up? Then should this king teach you a good lesson?" Lunar King licked her red lips, her charming eyes like water, exuding a dangerous aura. Pure Golden King was suddenly shocked. Although this fourth sister was amorous and full of a big enchantress, her temper was very explosive. She even dared to hit the boss. Then what was he? If he counted the number of times he was beaten in the past, it would definitely give him a psychological shadow. Okay, let me do it." Ma Duobao walked out with a big belly and smiled. "This formation is not broken. Anyway, we just want to pass through. Just make an opening. Isn't this going in? Your Majesty, your pursuit is too low." Lunar King immediately objected. "Yes, the boss is not domineering enough. Let's blast it open." The other 7 kings also echoed. Ma Duobao chuckled with an amiable appearance. His small eyes narrowed into slits, and he said, "Dear ministers, do you have any dissatisfaction with me?" The 8 kings immediately shook their heads in unison. What a joke, this boss was usually very easy to talk to, but once he got serious he would kill gods and Buddhas who blocked his way. Which one of them wasn't arrogant and unruly at the beginning? Weren't they all beaten into submission by Ma Duobao? It's good that there isn't. Ma Duobao said with a smile, and casually drew a few fingers. Kwang. A gap immediately appeared in this mountain-protecting formation. The light shield was cut open with a large hole, enough to accommodate an army. So strong. Ling Han was secretly speechless. Previously, the Pure Golden King wanted to break the formation, but Ma Duobao only opened a passage. The difficulty couldn't be mentioned in the same breath, but a casual stroke had such destructive power. It really made sense that Ma Duobao could become the boss of the 8 kings. He looked up, and the Heaven Sword sect was already close at hand. Oh. Chapter 830. When was the last time he came to the Heaven Sword sect? Ling Han couldn't help but reveal a dazed expression, as if he returned to 10,000 years ago, when he was invited by the Sword Emperor to come here to refine pills, and it was here that he swindled the 3 styles of black origin. 10,000 years passed, and this place didn't seem to have changed at all, as if it was yesterday. Woo! The horn sounded, and countless people flew out from various places in the mountains. This mountain guarding formation was broken, so the entire sect was obviously mobilized. The auras of elites rose and fell, frightening and astonishing. If these people joined forces and attacked together, would the vast lands instantly collapse? However, with the existence of the Eye of Heavenly Tao, it shouldn't be so, and it would definitely interfere to maintain the stability of this realm. For the Eye of Heavenly Tao, as long as the order of this realm wasn't destroyed, it wouldn't care no matter how many people were killed. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress and Beast Snake King were both here, and counting them, the number of Shattering Void tier elites was actually in the hundreds. It could be seen that the 5 great sects should have used all their resources to fight a decisive battle to the death with the Purple Moon Empire here. After this battle, the world would be at peace. A feeling of disbelief rose up in Ling Han. This was too easy, wasn't it? Thinking again, the Purple Moon Empire certainly grasped overwhelming power. Even if Ma Duobao didn't make a move, the 8 kings already beat the 5 sects to a pulp, and in the end they could only defend this last place. Now that a decisive battle happened, it seemed reasonable. Esteemed guests have come from afar, and I didn't go out to greet you. Forgive me, forgive me. An amiable-looking old man walked out. He was tall and slender, with a head full of white hair and a white beard, wearing a coarse hemp robe. When he walked out like this, even the Sword King and Azure Phoenix Divine Empress took a step back in unplanned unison, making way for him to take his place. Now there were only 4 similarly white-haired old men, 4 men and 1 woman, that could stand side by side with this old man. They were definitely old antiques, and it was obvious that their vitality had declined. It was very strange. The 5 sects clearly had the time source fluid, which could seal the loss of their own life. After the reckoning, they could enter the immortal realm to break through, and then become immortals. Their lifespan would be terrifyingly increased. Haha, is this to deal with powerful enemies like us? Justice Mountain King sneered. It is impossible to break through to the immortal level in this world, so the longer one spends, the higher the possibility of advancing further in the Shattering Void tier, and increasing one's battle prowess to 15 stars, 16 stars, or even higher, the Flame King continued. However, 14 stars is a threshold. Every subsequent star is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even Shattering Void tier cultivators only have a lifespan of a little over 1,000 years. So what if they spend their entire life studying? Their natural talent is there for all to see. If they can only reach 12 stars of battle prowess in their prime, then even if they die of old age, they'll at most reach 14 stars. The 8 kings spoke one after another, not minding the 5 elders at all. Haha, I've long since heard that the 8 kings are heroic and matchless, and that their divine skills are unrivaled. Today I finally get to see them for myself. The old man from before wasn't angry at all. Instead, he laughed and said, "How about we make a bet? A bunch of losers. What qualifications do you have to bet with us?" Sneered the 8 kings. "You don't dare?" The elder provoked. Although the 8 kings were heroic, they would never act rashly. None of them spoke up. This time they were here to pacify the 5 sects, so what bet? Yet Ma Duobao smiled and said, "What bet? We're martial artists, so the bet is obviously on strength." The old man laughed. "Let's both sides send out 9 people to fight one-on-one. Whichever side wins 5 rounds wins this bet." The 8 kings were all stunned. Fight 9 rounds? Did you know that the 8 kings plus Ma Duobao just happened to be 9 people, which also happened to be the strongest battle force of the Purple Moon Empire? This kind of one-on-one duel could be said to be the Purple Moon Empire's strongest suit. Using one's weakness to fight another's strength, so stupid. But the 5 sects had so many old foxes, so how could they all be stupid? Ma Duobao continued to ask, "What if we win, and what if we lose?" This was the key. Otherwise it wouldn't hurt or itch even if they lost, so a bet was fine. The old man said, "If we lose, we'll pledge allegiance to the Purple Moon Empire, and you can deal with us however you want." With that said, even the 8 kings were moved. Did the other party have too much to eat? Or was his brain damaged or kicked by a donkey? Ma Duobao smiled as if he didn't care, and said, "Then what if we lose? Within 100 years, no more fighting." The old man raised a finger. The conditions of this bet could be said to be extremely unfair. If the 5 sects lost, their lives would be dealt with at will, but if the Purple Moon Empire lost, they would only be unable to raise their troops within 100 years. For normal people 100 years was a lifetime, but for Shattering Void tier elites 100 years was only 10 years for normal people. Ma Duobao revealed a puzzled expression. The 5 sects could only rely on the number of Shattering Void tier elites. As the saying went, many ants could bite an elephant to death, and there was strength in numbers. However, he was obviously unafraid. Aside from himself, no one knew how powerful his strength was. Now the 5 sects gave up their advantage in numbers, and wanted to fight one-on-one with them. This was really pitifully stupid. What was the reason behind this? The old man raised another finger, and said with a smile, "However, we have a restriction." This was the main point. That is, Your Majesty cannot participate in the battle. Ma Duobao couldn't participate in the battle, which indeed made the Purple Moon Empire lose a super battle force. But the problem was that the 8 kings were practically invincible. Up until now, aside from the giant silver spider in the Fire Country's ancient mining area in Yishuang, there shouldn't be any living shattering void tier 15 stars of battle prowess, right? Even if the 5 sects could find these two, and the 8 kings lost these 2 matches, well, wouldn't they still be able to guarantee a steady victory in 6 matches? Strange. Do you dare? The old general said. Ma Duobao pondered slightly, then nodded and said, all right, I accept this bet. After all, the other party had over 100 shattering void tier elites, and as long as a few escaped, they could wreak havoc in the world, which was enough to cause massive damage to the power of the nation. Thus, if they could subdue the enemy without fighting, this was the best strategy. The old man laughed and said, since that's the case, then we'll send someone out first for the first match, and rotate for the next match. Such an exchange, your majesty can accept it? Yes, Ma Duobao agreed. And you'll fight in the first match, the old man said. Yes, the Sword King agreed. His figure soared into the air, stopping 100 miles above the mountain peak, and said, 8 kings who will fight with me? I'll do it. The Lunar King also soared, standing beside the Sword King. The first match was obviously won by the Purple Moon Empire. The Sword King was indeed very strong, comprehending sword heart, but he hadn't reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, and his battle prowess was only 11 stars. How could he rival the Lunar King? This wasn't a contest on the same level at all. Please. The Sword King wasn't afraid, and formed a sword seal in his hand, looking elegant and graceful. Chapter 831. Ling Han was very satisfied, because he himself did not use much power in this strike, and it was completely the might of the divine demon sword itself. It was clearly only a level 3 god tool, but because it was branded with his martial intent, it actually possessed might above its cultivation level, and could definitely rival a level 4 god tool. Even a god tool could surpass its cultivation level in battle. Shua, the remaining fierce fish, hurriedly waved their tails and turned to flee. Previously, Ling Han had only scraped off the fish's scales, and did not kill them, so these fierce fish had no scruples, but when they discovered that this person was not a great philanthropist to be trifled with, they naturally fled without a trace. So this is the number 1 divine sword in the world? Shui Yinyu naturally saw Gu Jinhui, and knew that he had specially come to deliver the sword to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded and said, I owe him a great favor. Shui Yinyu smiled and said, I definitely owe him a favor, but I believe that it is only in your hands that this sword can truly reach the pinnacle. For a sword forger, this is what they would think of the most. Otherwise, if it were to be kept in their own hands, it would only be a bright pearl gathering dust. Wife, you are getting better and better at talking. Your little mouth is really sweet, Ling Han said with a smile. He acted as if he was going to pinch Shui Yinyu's cheek, causing her to roll her eyes at him, extremely annoyed. I'm really looking forward to it. Let's have some stronger fierce fish so that this sword can be upgraded to the level of level 4 godly metal. Shui Yinyu looked into the distance, and her expression suddenly changed. She said, You jinx. In front of them, there was a large fish that was several thousand meters long. Though it was not the largest, the waves that it raised surged over, directly tossing Ling Han and Shui Yinyu out. They did not have the slightest ability to fight back at all. The power of this fish has at least reached the Sun-Moon tier, Ling Han said. The large fish approached aggressively. It opened its large mouth and with a suck, all the seawater in the vicinity suddenly surged into its mouth. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu were no exception, and were sucked in by the suction force. What are you waiting for? Ling Han shouted. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly charged out. The power of the Sun-Moon tier surged, and he shot out a punch, compressing the seawater and forming a shock wave that continuously expanded towards the large fish. Pung! The large fish was instantly sent flying several thousand meters away. The power of this punch was extremely powerful, and even a hole had appeared in its body, from which blood seeped out. In pain, the large fish charged back angrily, and with a wave of its tail, raging waves swept out. The Azura Demon Emperor charged forward. Though he was pitifully small, his power was not inferior. He shot out a punch, and it collided head-on with the large fish, both of which were bounced back. The man and the fish battled fiercely. Neither of them was a true cultivator. One was a puppet, and relied on true origin stones and formation patterns to possess battle prowess of the Sun-Moon tier, while the other was blessed by nature, possessing a massive body and terrifying power. This was like an ant. How long would it need to cultivate before it could reach the same level of power as an ordinary person? The strength of the two of them was about the same, but the puppet had the advantage in that it could not feel pain. Moreover, its body was forged from high-grade godly metal, so it naturally had a huge advantage. After a few dozen exchanges, many of the large fish's scales had fallen off, and it was beginning to bleed. It was scared, and with a wave of its tail, it fled without a trace. "Fuck your grandpa, I little Azura am really too powerful," the Azura Demon Emperor said proudly. He was able to defeat an opponent at the Sun-Moon tier. This was something that he had never imagined in the past. This was too awesome. When Ling Han walked over, the Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly swept away the smugness on his face. There was a fawning expression on his face, and he said, "Little Azura is really too grateful, Master. Master, you are like little Azura's second parent. You are the red sun in little Azura's life, and wherever it shines, it will shine brightly." He began to crazily flatter Ling Han, completely unaware of the meaning of corny. Enough. Otherwise, I'm going to vomit." Ling Han hurriedly waved his hand, and Shui Yinyu pursed her lips into a smile. Only then did the Azura Demon Emperor shut his mouth in embarrassment. He felt as if he hadn't realized what Ling Han was trying to say. In any case, it was impossible for him to increase his strength through cultivation. Thus, he had been training his skills in flattery these past few days. It was rare for him to come across such a great opportunity to display his skills, yet he had never thought that he would be stopped just as he was about to speak. This made him feel slightly depressed. Why didn't Master allow him to display his skills to the fullest? After entering deep into the sea, this forest revealed its magnificent side. These gigantic seaweeds were no longer a single dark green color. Instead, they had become a riot of colors. There were purple, red, and orange, and the colors of the fish had also become rich and colorful. However, the threat of these fish had become even greater. That was because these big guys clearly didn't have the slightest fluctuation of origin power, yet they were born with divine patterns that gave them special abilities. There was a gigantic octopus that spat out ink when it came into contact with them, turning the surroundings pitch black. Not only could one not see their own fingers in front of them, even their divine sense was completely blocked. This made people completely blind, and they could only passively take a beating. There was a gigantic fish that had 5 colored spikes growing from its head. Ling Han saw it pierce through the body of another gigantic fish with a single strike, strangling it to death. There were also some that possessed lethal poison. They didn't need to hit their opponents at all. Wherever their bodies swam past, there would be a poisonous domain. Many gigantic fish directly flipped over, and were easily poisoned to death. This was a dangerous place. Big fish ate small fish and small fish ate cultivators. Of course, when the big fish were eating, they wouldn't mind eating a few cultivators along the way either. There were corpses of gigantic fish everywhere, as well as the remains of cultivators. Usually, only a hand, a leg, or a head remained, bobbing up and down in the sea. The cloud-piercing shuttle wasn't very useful in an environment of water. Thus, Ling Han didn't use this god tool. If he came across any gigantic fish below the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, he would let the Azura Demon Emperor deal with them. If he came across any stronger fish, he would hide in the Black Tower, and only come out when the situation had calmed down. The fish here were still somewhat valuable. Some of the bones of the fish were metallized, and their quality was comparable to godly metal of the same level. Thus, whenever he came across them, Ling Han would store them in the Black Tower. In the future, he could use them to increase the might of the divine demon sword. In a certain corner of the deep sea, Empress Luanxing was currently facing off against an elder. Nearby them, there was a 3-colored lotus that was in full bloom. Even in this kind of environment, one could still smell an incredibly serene fragrance. Unsurprisingly, this was a godly medicine. Otherwise, how could it have attracted Empress Luanxing's attention? However, that elder was actually able to stand on equal footing with her, which meant that his strength was definitely extraordinary. They both stood with their hands clasped behind their back. There wasn't a single drop of seawater in the space of about 3 meters around them, demonstrating their powerful strength. They could even isolate themselves from the seawater in this place. This is only a 3-colored wind and fire lotus, the elder said. It'll take at least several 100 million years for it to advance to the 7-colored level. It's completely useless to fairy, so why don't you give it to me? I won't take it for free. I'm willing to compensate you with 3 dragon fragrance pills. How about it? The 3-colored wind and fire lotus was a rare treasure of heaven and earth. If a mountain river tier cultivator placed it in their Dantian world, they would be able to receive the nourishment of the divine lotus at all times. Not only would the speed at which they accumulated their cultivation level skyrocket, but the divine lotus was also a rare treasure of heaven and earth. One could also use the divine lotus to communicate with the Tao of heaven and earth, and even their comprehension of cultivation level would receive a shocking increase. However, when cultivators advanced into the sun-moon tier, the essence of the divine lotus would also be completely extracted, and it would naturally wither. This one was only 3-colored. If it reached the 5-colored level, it could be used by sun-moon tier cultivators, and if it was 7-colored, even heavenly body tiers would view it as a precious treasure. Chapter 832. The 8 kings' expressions changed at the same time, while the 5 sects let out thunderous cheers. Zhuo Qifeng stood proudly with his hands still behind his back, and said with a smile, "Can you go any faster? Otherwise, you won't be able to catch up to me." Justice Mountain King's expression turned serious. Ma Duobao's evaluation of this person was very strong, using 2 varies in a row. Although he only showed terrifying speed just now, his battle prowess definitely wasn't weak, or else he wouldn't be worthy of Ma Duobao's evaluation. He crossed his hands and endless might circulated. Power of regulation. Zhuo Qifeng frowned. This is a bit troublesome. One move might not be enough to settle it. If he had said this before, no one would have believed him. Defeating the 8 kings was a completely unrealistic thing, and he still wanted to kill them in one move. However, after he had displayed his astonishing speed, his weight had suddenly become heavier, and people could not help but think deeply about it. Perhaps he really was extremely powerful. After all, there were still 5 levels between Shattering Void tier 15 and 20 stars, so why couldn't he be a 16-star, 17-star, or even 19-star or 20-star supreme? Justice Mountain King shouted sharply. Lightning flashed and he charged towards Zhuo Qifeng again, golden handprints dancing in the sky. Zhuo Qifeng only moved his feet to dodge, moving freely in this golden light. However, Justice Mountain King also used the power of regulation this time, and unlike Ling Han who could only cast it on his left hand, it turned into lines that slowly weaved into a net, enveloping Zhuo Qifeng within. Withdraw. Justice Mountain King snorted, and the net of regulation was withdrawn. Like fishing, Zhuo Qifeng had no room to dodge. Zhuo Qifeng smiled faintly, and extended a finger, pressing forward. Open. Wang, a faint radiance flickered on his finger, and the net of regulation immediately broke open. He walked out calmly and said with a smile, "Just now was one move. I'll use another move to suppress you." He extended another finger, and a giant silver finger 3,000 meters long instantly appeared in the sky, pressing towards Zhuo Qifeng. The giant finger streaked past, burning the air and destroying all things. 18 stars! Lunar King and the other 6 kings exclaimed at the same time, disbelief on their faces. The power of this attack actually reached 18 stars. Hong! As the giant finger descended, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. The scorching sun lost its light and countless stars fell from the sky. Everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. Was this really something that a human could do? Wasn't this the power of a god? However, the eye of heavenly Tao did not appear, which meant that this was an attack unleashed by the peak of human Tao. A few powerhouses took action and swept away the dust in the air, only to see that the place where the Justice Mountain King originally stood was empty. There were no traces of him or any fragments of his body. We have lost this battle, Ma Duobao said as he carried Justice Mountain Monarch in his hand. If he had not acted just now, Justice Mountain Monarch would have been heavily injured even if he did not die. An 18-star versus a 15-star. This was a crushing battle strength. Zhuoqi looked at Ma Duobao and said, "Your battle prowess should have reached 20 stars, right?" The 8 kings were furious at the same time. This was their king. Normally they could laugh and joke around, but they definitely wouldn't allow others to disrespect him. Ma Duobao, however, did not answer. Instead he asked, "You should have come from the immortal realm, right? Just now, you also used the power of regulation, but it was very different from the world power of this realm." What? Everyone was startled. Coming from the immortal realm, this could explain why he was already in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier at such a young age, and his battle prowess even reached 18 stars. However, the problem was, why would the immortal realm send someone down at this time? Zhuoqi Fang laughed loudly and said, as expected, "I can't hide it from you. That's right, I indeed came from the immortal realm and really want to fight with you. However, 20 stars of battle prowess. This is known as extreme battle prowess, and even I have no confidence in escaping unscathed." He admitted it. Ling Han's heart beat wildly. Now it was very obvious why the 5 sects would set such a wager. The immortal realm definitely wasn't the only one that came down. Zhuoqi Fang was against Ma Duobao alone, so there should be 5. Then as long as they kicked Ma Duobao away, they could secure 5 victories. Who would have thought that the immortal realm would actually send someone down? To send a god down, the expenditure is too great, so only a few Shattering Void tier elites came. Zhuoqi Fang explained kindly. But this is enough. After all, we came from the immortal realm. Clear Sun King walked out and said, "I'll fight in the next match." Who will fight this king? Xiao, a young woman, leaped out. She was similarly astonishingly young, and had phoenix eyes and a jade-like nose, as beautiful as a person from a painting. She had a slender figure, and her willowy waist could only be grasped with one hand. Her chest rose and fell slightly, forming a graceful curve. 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, needless to say. She was definitely a genius from the immortal realm. A genius fostered by the 5 sects of the immortal realm. In comparison, Su Xiaoran, Small Sword Emperor, and Dong Ling these lower realm geniuses paled in comparison. The difference wasn't just a little. The resources of the immortal realm were definitely far above that of the lower realm, and if the top-notch geniuses fostered couldn't reach such a standard, then it would be wrong, right? The problem was, did these two represent the strongest among the younger generation of the 5 sects? Xiao Miaoyan, the young woman said indifferently. The young woman said faintly. Although her expression was calm, one could see a trace of deep disdain in her eyes. It was disdain. The lower realm in her eyes was a synonym for lowliness. A mere medicinal garden that provided them with realm pills naturally made her look down on them. Clear Sun King naturally didn't dare to have any more carelessness, and immediately used his strongest ultimate move. He didn't learn the Thunderclap 9th heaven, but his body turned into flames, forming a sea of fire that burned towards Xiao Miaoyan. This was even hotter than the sun, forcing many Shattering Void tier elites to make a move to bind the high temperature within a certain area, or else it would cause a terrifying disaster. Xiao Miaoyan, however, was fearless. 2 wings spread out behind her, which were as long as 300 meters, wrapping around her, completely fearless of the flames that seemed to burn the heavens. Cloud Phoenix Sect. Although she didn't know what it was called in the immortal realm, Xiao Miaoyan made a move, and similarly her battle prowess was astonishing. With a few moves, she suppressed Clear Sun King and pulled back a point. Next, the 5 sects sent out 2 more young geniuses, called Chun Wenshi and Guanyang, who similarly had battle prowess of 18 stars of Shattering Void tier, turning the score of the 2 sides into 4-4. Only the last match was left. If Ma Duobao could make a move, he would definitely be able to win for sure, but the other party had long set up this trap and excluded him. Not to mention that the 8 kings had already made a move once. Even if they could go on stage again, would they be a match for the geniuses of the immortal realm? I am Wu Gaoan. I wonder who will be the one to give me some pointers? The last person of the 5 sects was similarly extremely young. He was dressed in white, and had an elegant demeanor. Ma Duobao and the 8 kings couldn't help but frown. Could it be that they were really going to lose? If they lost, they would have to lie dormant for 100 years. And who knew how many changes would happen? When the time came, the immortal realm would open the passage and send down real gods. And there would be endless variables. They were unwilling. "I'll go," Ling Han said. Chapter 833. Come on. To put it simply, Lu Xian was only in the divine transformation realm. If he went up there, wouldn't he be selling himself? This was no joke. If he was too weak, he wouldn't even be able to take one move. Just the aura that burst out of his opponent would be enough to kill him. Ma Duobao did not believe in Ling Han's realm, but he believed in Ling Han as a person. He only frowned and said, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Ling Han nodded. "All right." Ma Duobao never did things sloppily. He immediately nodded and said, "You're up for the last match. Big brother Han." Zhu Xianair pulled on Ling Han's hand. Her pretty face filled with worry. He wasn't an ordinary person, but a prodigy that had descended from the immortal realm. He could look down on the prodigies of the older generation, and even a super elite like the Lunar King was no match for him. Ling Han nodded and said, "Don't worry, I'll be fine. Ling Han, you can do it." Hunyo waved her little hands and cheered him on. "Beat him up. There's no need to give Uncle Rabbit face." Rabbit shouted from the side. Ling Han strode out and said, "I'll accept this battle." Puff the 5 sects were all laughing uncontrollably. You, a mere deity transformation tier elite, actually wanted to participate in this kind of battle? Wasn't this just seeking death? Putting aside the battle prowess of 18 stars of Shattering Void tier, any Shattering Void tier elite could easily slap him to death. Did the Purple Moon Dynasty give up? That's right, Ma Duobao couldn't go up, so no matter who went up, they could only swallow the fruit of defeat. It was the same no matter who went up. However, the Demon Snake King's expression changed slightly, and he said, "This child cannot be underestimated. His defensive power is extremely strong, extremely strong." At least, when he had slapped the other party, it was as if nothing had happened. Such a defensive power was really terrifying. Because this matter was rather embarrassing, he didn't tell anyone, and even made Su Xiaoran keep his mouth shut. As a result, no one knew that Ling Han's physique was actually comparable to 10th tier rare metal. "You." Wu Gaoyuan couldn't help but frown. "Who do you think I am? Are you even worthy of fighting me?" He felt utterly humiliated. This Purple Moon Empire probably knew that he would definitely lose, so he deliberately sent a deity transformation tier elite to humiliate him. Detestable, truly detestable. An ominous glint flashed in his eyes. Since that was the case, he would torture Ling Han to death. What face would Ling Han have? "Cut the crap. Make your move." Ling Han beckoned with his finger. Wu Gaoyuan had already regained his composure, and his anger had transformed into dense killing intent. He revealed a cruel smile and raised his hand. Instantly, a myriad of silver lights flickered and transformed into countless sharp swords that shot towards Ling Han. 10,000 swords pierced the heart. Ling Han didn't make a move. He only raised his sword heart. Shwa shwa shwa, the sharp swords streaked past his body, but they didn't even harm a single hair on his body. Sword heart Wu Gaoyuan was slightly startled, and then laughed loudly. Not bad, you actually comprehended the heart of martial art. This is truly rare. You have to know that even in our divine realm, only 1 out of 10 Shattering Void tier elites would at most comprehend the heart of martial art. So few, Ling Han said inwardly. The 8 kings all cultivated the heart of martial art, and there were quite a few in the 5 sections. The Sword King, Severing Heaven Saber, and even Su Xiaoran and Small Sword Emperor all cultivated the heart of martial art. In terms of proportion, this was at least 1/10 or even more. But thinking about it again, this was actually normal. Although the divine realm was rich in cultivation resources, it could only allow martial artists to reach the Shattering Void tier faster, or even higher levels. However, martial art still needed to be comprehended on one's own. Moreover, due to the lack of cultivation resources in the lower realm, those who could break through to the Shattering Void tier were all geniuses among geniuses, so the ratio of comprehending the heart of martial art was naturally higher. I'm slightly interested. Wu Gaoyuan's killing intent blazed even more. It's only interesting to kill such geniuses. Not bad, not bad. Cultivating sword heart in the deity transformation tier, you should be the first in the lower realm, right? Su Xiaoran and Small Sword Emperor both revealed looks of disdain. They were only born in the lower realm, and if they could obtain the divine realm's resources to cultivate, they definitely wouldn't be weaker than Wu Gaoyuan and the others. Ling Han extended his hand, then crooked his finger and said, "Are you born in the year of the donkey, so long-winded?" A vein popped out on Wu Gaoyuan's forehead, and he said menacingly, "Angering me won't do you any good. You're still long-winded," Ling Han said sarcastically. Fuck. Wu Gaoyuan finally couldn't hold back, and struck out with another palm strike. This time it was still a dance of tens of thousands of swords, but with the support of Sword Heart, its power was obviously stronger, and it couldn't possibly be affected by Ling Han's Sword Heart. A full power attack of 18 stars of Shattering Void tier. How to block it? Completely unblockable. Pong. Ling Han was immediately sent flying like a kite with a broken string. Wu Gaoyuan snorted and said, "Do we still need to compete?" Of course. Ling Han crawled up from the ground and stretched his muscles and bones. Pa pa pa, the bones all over his body cracked, and his blood and chi boiled, soaring into the sky. Everyone was dumbfounded. Was this guy a freak? Previously, Justice Mountain King was almost killed in a single blow, and only escaped a calamity thanks to Ma Duobao's intervention, but Ling Han took this blow and was completely fine. How could anyone believe it? He was only in the deity transformation tier, so how could he be so strong? This boy's physique is comparable to 10th tier rare metal. A Shattering Void tier elite exclaimed. The other people of the 5 sects finally understood, but they still couldn't help but grimace. This guy was too freakish. A deity transformation tier with a physique comparable to 10th tier rare metal. Wouldn't that be close to invincible? No wonder this guy dared to enter the field. This physique was nature-defying, which was equivalent to standing in an invincible position. 10th tier rare metal? Wu Gaoyuan sneered. So what? I'll still refine it. Ling Han brushed off his hands and said, "Don't just brag, come and fight. If you can't win against me in 10 moves, it'll be considered your loss." Fuck, you can't talk your own way. Wu Gaoyuan snorted and said, "Who promised you that there would be a limit of 10 moves? You, a Shattering Void tier elite with 18 stars of battle prowess, fight me, a deity transformation tier elite, and 10 moves still aren't enough? How about I start with one hand?" Ling Han said with a smile. This guy was really evil. Wu Gaoyuan was also quite angry, and this time he really couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with Ling Han. He directly pounced out and launched an attack at Ling Han. Shua, he drew out a treasured sword, its cold light shocking the skies. This was a 10th tier spirit tool, and at this moment it was completely awakened, as if a Shattering Void tier elite had joined the battle. Ling Han was unafraid. He didn't want to win in the first place, and instead wanted to drag the final battle to a draw. Then, who cared if it was 1 or 10 Shattering Void tier elites? He would only defend and not attack. Come. Hong, hong, hong. Wu Gaoyuan brandished the 10th tier spirit tool and slashed wildly at Ling Han like a demon god. Oh. Chapter 834. One had to know that when level 10 spirit tools collided with level 10 spirit tools, it was impossible for both to come out unscathed. If the number of collisions was few, it was indeed fine, but if the number of collisions increased, one side would definitely be injured. And if the quality of the two was almost the same, then there would be damage. Thus, even if Ling Han's physique was comparable to level 10 rare metal, he could still be injured by a level 10 spirit tool and even severed. Wu Gaoyuan's battle prowess was really too strong. With a few strikes, Ling Han began to bleed, and even the physique of level 10 rare metal couldn't withstand it. "Ha ha, stubborn, try being stubborn again," he said with a loud laugh. "This isn't stubbornness but strength," Ling Han said with a faint smile, channeling the indestructible heaven scroll, and his wounds immediately healed automatically. If this injury wasn't caused by a shattering void tier elite, then Body of Diamond could heal itself. Unfortunately, a shattering void tier's attack naturally brought with it the will of martial art, which could obstruct Body of Diamond's self-healing. He had to channel the indestructible heaven scroll to expel Wu Gaoyuan's will of martial art before his injuries could be healed. The speed was shockingly fast, and he instantly recovered completely. His blood and qi were exuberant as if they could burn the heavens. What? Seeing this scene, everyone was speechless. What kind of fuck you level of recovery ability was this? It was fine if his physique was tough, and if he really couldn't be damaged, he could still slowly refine it, but such recovery ability coupled with such a physique, it became unsolvable. Such recovery ability, can you always have it? Wu Gaoyuan sneered. He didn't believe that Ling Han could possess such terrifying recovery ability without limit, and it definitely wouldn't be long before it became ineffective. He attacked madly, wanting to force Ling Han to his limit. Everyone nodded. How could such shocking recovery ability be maintained forever? The consumption was definitely extremely great. Moreover, there was no need to wait for such recovery ability to disappear. As long as the speed of recovery couldn't keep up with the destructive power, then Ling Han would still die. However, to everyone's surprise, Ling Han stood up again and again. No matter how the wind blew, he was like a boulder, unmoving. Wu Gaoyuan did not believe it. He kept thinking that Ling Han would reach his limit after the next round, but he was disappointed again and again. Ling Han stood up again and stood up again. This he was clearly strong, and not just by a little bit. He could absolutely crush his opponent, but he was helpless against this freak. All he could do was continuously knock him down, but there was no way he could kill him. The 8 kings finally revealed looks of joy. They had originally thought that they were going to be tricked by the 5 sects this time. With their personalities, they would definitely not go back on their word and would not send out troops for the next 100 years. Although he felt helpless, keeping his promise was naturally more important than anything else. It's a miracle. Although Ling Han definitely couldn't win, as long as he didn't lose, this match would be a draw, and the whole wager would also be a draw. They obviously didn't have to keep their promise of not sending troops for 100 years. Even Ma Duobao nodded slightly. He knew that Ling Han wasn't simple, but he never expected that he would be this extraordinary. On the other hand, the 5 sects' faces were all gloomy. They deliberately showed weakness earlier, luring Ma Duobao and the others to agree to the wager, and were about to succeed. Who would have thought that such a freak would actually appear? 9 matches were a draw, and even if it was overtime, would Ma Duobao still agree to not fight? Damn this damned brat. The 5 sects all hated Ling Han. If this battle really ended in a draw, Ling Han would be the 5 sects' mortal enemy. Moreover, this brat's current cultivation was only in the deity transformation tier. If he advanced into the shattering void tier, who in the world could stop him? Wu Gaoyuan went mad. He thought highly of himself, and the geniuses of the immortal realm obviously couldn't stand someone from the lower realm. This time, the 5 great divine sects paid a great price to send their 5 shattering void tier elites over, all for the sake of turning the tide. But now, a mere deity transformation tier elite stopped him. If this were to spread back to the immortal realm, would he still have the face to see others in the future? He brandished his treasured sword, continuously slashing at Ling Han, vowing to blast Ling Han into dregs. It was useless. Ling Han didn't have an indestructible body, and he would also be injured. However, his recovery speed was so fast that it made people speechless. Unless one had the ability to destroy Ling Han's vitals in one strike, he would never be defeated if the battle continued like this. Wu Gaoyuan already went all out. He formed Sword Heart, but hadn't reached the level of illumination. He wanted to use Sword Heart to slash at Ling Han's spirit, but in a contest of spirits, Ling Han wasn't the slightest bit weaker. He also formed Sword Heart and was even close to reaching great accomplishment. The two battled fiercely. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, 3 days passed. It was unknown how many injuries Ling Han suffered, but now he didn't come out at all. The only change was that the clothes he wore had changed quite a few times. It couldn't be helped. The indestructible heaven scroll couldn't restore his clothes, and since they were torn, he could only change to a new set. Although there was no set time, it's impossible to fight endlessly, Ma Duobao said. Enough, this battle is considered a draw. How could it be a draw? The 5 sects obviously wouldn't accept it, and said one after another. Wu Gaoyuan obviously had the absolute upper hand. Is having the upper hand the same as winning? The Lunar King sneered. Then why don't you say that Ling Han is only in the deity transformation tier, but could rival a Shattering Void tier elite for 3 days? This king would say that Ling Han won. Ma Duobao took a few steps forward and said, I say this battle is a draw. Who has an opinion? Someone from the 5 sects jumped out. It was a Shattering Void tier elite, but only in the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void tier. Ma Duobao glanced at him, and with a wave of his right hand, endless killing intent intertwined. That Shattering Void tier elite was actually swept by a ball of light, and was instantly torn into pieces. Fresh blood dripped, shaking the entire mountain. This Shattering Void tier elite actually couldn't stand up again, and his aura was quickly dissipating. Dead with just one strike, an elite in the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void tier was killed, and from such a long distance. It was like taking the head of a general among a million people was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket, easy and pleasant. This was the strength of the Purple Moon Empire's #1 elite. Ma Duobao didn't take another look, and said indifferently, who else has an opinion? For a moment, no one from the 5 sects made a sound. Even as strong as Zhuo Qifeng and the other 3 didn't dare to confront Ma Duobao head-on. Battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. Absolutely. How could a human possibly cultivate to battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier? Even the descendants of divine beasts and saints rarely could reach such heights. Damn it, if it was in the immortal realm, the sect could just casually send out a person to kill him. Zhuo Qifeng and the other 3 communicated in soft voices. They were judging whether they could stop Ma Duobao if the 5 of them joined forces. But even if they could, who among the 8 kings could stop them? Wu Gaoyuan, catch the axe. An old man with lightning flickering on his body suddenly waved his hand, and threw an axe at Zhuo Qifeng. Mountain and river axe. It wasn't an imitation, but a real mountain and river axe, with the surface of the axe made from the power of the realm. With a strike from this axe, would even a 10th tier rare metal be directly cut in half. Chapter 835. If only one person could survive, Xue Yinyu naturally hoped that it would be Ling Han. She didn't care about how the situation of the world would change after Empress Luanxing died. Nor did she care about how many people would hunt her and Ling Han down. At this moment, she only wanted Ling Han to be alive. However, when she thrust her sword forward, it was tightly grasped by a hand, unable to advance any further. Empress Luanxing had already raised her head, and her body had also turned around. Though her expression couldn't be seen, it was clear that she was definitely enraged to the point of madness. Her own subordinate actually dared to assassinate her. A heinous crime of treason. Boundless killing intent surged, bringing with it a terrifying domineering imperial might, causing Xue Yinyu's face to turn pale. It was as if all blood had drained from her face. However, she was unafraid, and only looked at Ling Han with deep love. They couldn't live together, but they could die together. However, the fatal blow that she had imagined didn't arrive even after a long time. She couldn't help but feel strange and walked towards Empress Luanxing. However, this empress's entire body was enveloped in an aura of primal chaos, so it was impossible to see the expression on her face. Ling Han's body moved and he woke up. The massive loss of blood caused him to instantly faint. However, his divine sense was extremely powerful and resilient, so he naturally woke up very quickly. He reached out and grabbed Empress Luanxing's wrist, his expression determined. If there's anything, come at me. He was extremely weak, but his tone was resolute. Empress Luanxing flew into a rage. How pure was she? Yet she had actually sucked the blood of a stinky man? This made her feel as if she had been defiled. She resolutely raised her hand, and 4 heavenly bodies appeared behind her. Each of the heavenly bodies exuded a terrifying aura, causing Ling Han's skin to instantly burst open. However, all of his blood had been sucked away, and not a single drop of blood flowed out at this moment. It was an extremely strange sight. Biting the hand that feeds you. Ling Han was not going to wait for death in vain. He immediately said, "Don't think that I don't know that you were injured just then. You sucked my blood to control your injuries, or perhaps to unleash some kind of secret technique." "So what?" Empress Luan Xing said coldly. Her target had been Shui Yinyu in the first place. It wasn't like she was going to kill her, so why did she have to come over? Tui, she had sucked this man's dirty blood. And they had even become intimate with each other. Just thinking about it gave her goosebumps. She was disgusted to the extreme. As an empress, you have to be able to distinguish between kindness and hatred. If you kill us, you will be considered to be muddle-headed and tyrannical. Ling Han said whatever he thought of. Now that he had fallen into the hands of an elite of the heavenly body tier, he naturally had to think of a way to escape. So what if I betray everyone in the world? Empress Luan Xing did not fall for his trick. Do you have any last words? Fuck, you don't play by the rules. Ling Han racked his brains, but the gap in power was too wide, so it seemed as if all his ideas were completely useless. Humph! Empress Luan Xing moved, and her palm struck toward Ling Han's head. Ling Han couldn't care less. Even if he had to expose the secret of the Black Tower, he had to let Small Tower make a move. At worst, he would just flee to the ends of the world. Now that he had entered the immortal realm, the world was vast, unlike the small world where elites could easily find him in such a small place. However, Empress Luan Xing's palm strike came to a halt midway. Damn it! The Empress cursed in her mind. At this moment, the will of the Ninth King actually appeared, and stopped her from delivering this palm strike. She wanted to sever this thought, but if she did, the implications would be too great. This meant that her 1,000,000 years of hard work would go up in smoke. True enough, she had stopped her too late. This detestable man had already formed a favorable impression of the Ninth King, and was affecting her at this moment. She steeled her heart, and was about to deliver another palm strike. However, a feeling of grief and resentment circulated in her heart, causing her to stop again. Detestable! Detestable! Empress Luan Xing humphed and tossed Ling Han out. She said coldly, "Today's matter has never happened." After saying this, her figure leaped, and she instantly disappeared without a trace. How unreasonable! Ling Han said through gritted teeth. He had already channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, but this was used to heal his injuries. In fact, he hadn't been injured, and it was only his origin energy that had been greatly depleted. Even this drop of indestructible true fluid couldn't completely heal him, and his face was still deathly pale. Meanwhile, Shui Yinyu felt as if she were dreaming. They had actually escaped a calamity. Master, I've missed you so much." The Azura Demon Emperor appeared, an expression of fear and trepidation on his face. "Fuck off." Ling Han sent him flying with a kick. This guy was indeed unreliable. Previously, when Empress Luan Xing had been present, he hadn't even dared to let out a fart. Now, however, he had actually run out. However, this couldn't be blamed. Even if the Azura Demon Emperor had run out, he would only be running to his death. Thus, Ling Han had only sent him flying to vent his anger, and hadn't dealt a fatal blow. Phew, I didn't die. How fortunate. Ling Han exhaled. He'd just treat it as if he had been bitten by a dog. There were plenty of tonics in the Black Tower, and it wouldn't be long before he could recover his origin energy. Meanwhile, Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes at him and said, "Do you know that you molested Her Majesty just then?" "Huh?" Ling Han wore a strange expression and said, "Are you joking? Just then I was about to be sucked dry, and I can still molest that woman?" "Humph, I clearly saw that both of your hands were grabbing onto Her Majesty's breasts." Shui Yinyu was filled with jealousy. Previously, she had only been concerned about Ling Han, and now that he was safe, she naturally began to feel jealous. What? Ling Han was stunned and raised his hands in disbelief. These two people had actually grabbed onto Empress Luan Xing's breasts. Fuck, why didn't he have the slightest impression? "Are you still thinking about it and are still thinking about it?" Shui Yinyu humphed. Men were indeed unreliable. What are you being jealous about? Ling Han pulled her into his arms and said, I almost died just then, so how could I think so much? Shui Yinyu also showed an expression of lingering fear. One of them had grabbed the Empress's breasts, and the other had attempted to commit regicide, yet neither of them had died. This was practically an inconceivable miracle. My wife's hands are still the best. Ling Han chuckled and grabbed onto the tea-bowl-sized breasts on Shui Yinyu's breasts. The feeling was really wonderful. Pervert, pervert. Shui Yinyu chided. She was just about to pinch Ling Han, yet discovered that Ling Han had already collapsed into her arms and had fainted. Instantly, tenderness filled her heart, and she wrapped her arms around Ling Han. This man had only stepped forward to protect her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have caused such trouble later on. She couldn't help but smile sweetly. If a woman could encounter a man who was willing to risk his life for her, what else could she ask for? She hugged Ling Han and allowed him to rest comfortably in her soft bosom. She did her best to rest. However, she still didn't understand. The Empress had clearly developed a frightening killing intent towards them, so why had she stopped? Was there anything in this world that could cause the Empress to feel apprehensive? Definitely not. But she very quickly tossed this thought to the back of her mind, and only stared at Ling Han in a daze, a sweet feeling in her heart. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.